They say everything started with nothing, but not the kind of nothing you get when you forget your wallet at home. I mean real nothing. No light, no time, no sky, no ground. Just a breathless silence that had never even heard of sound. And from that endless quiet came something the Greeks called chaos. Not a monster, not a storm, not even disorder, but a gap, a great yawning space that existed before anything else dared to. To the ancient Greeks, chaos wasn't a villain. It wasn't even alive. It was just the first thing that ever was, the moment existence blinked into being. Think of it like the empty stage before a play begins. The lights are off, the audience is waiting, and nothing has happened yet. But the stage is there. That's chaos, the space that made everything else possible. Then, without a bang or a spark, something began to form. From the stillness, Gaia, the earth, rose, solid, nurturing, alive. From the shadow, Erebus and Nyx, darkness and night, took shape. And from somewhere deep in that emptiness came Eros, the spark of attraction, the force that makes things come together. So before there were gods of thunder or war, there was love, the glue of the universe. That's how the Greeks imagined creation, not through violence, but through the pull of connection. It's wild to think that the very first Greek creation story doesn't have a creator at all. No Zeus throwing lightning, no divine architect, just space, a void that allows things to exist. And that idea is way deeper than it sounds, because chaos isn't really gone. It's still there, in the gaps between stars, in the silence between thoughts, in the moment right before you make a choice. The Greeks thought of chaos as the mother of potential. Everything starts from it and eventually returns to it. Even the name chaos in ancient Greek literally meant the gap or the opening. So the next time someone says their life is chaotic, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe it just means they're in that same cosmic space, the in-between, where new things can begin. Philosophers later took this further. Hesiod, one of the oldest Greek poets, started his theogony, the genealogy of the gods, with a simple line. First of all, chaos came to be. No explanation, no drama, just the quiet birth of being itself. To him, chaos wasn't scary, it was necessary. It was the blank page before the poem, the silence before music. So before Zeus, before Mount Olympus, before the idea of life or death, there was just a breathless, endless nothing, waiting to become something. And somehow, from that nothing, everything you've ever known, light, land, gods, love, even you, found a way to exist. Long before Zeus threw his first thunderbolt, before the earth had a name, before even chaos stretched its endless void, there was movement. Not light, not sound, just a quiet ripple through the nothingness. That ripple was time itself, Chronos, twisting slowly through the dark like a serpent trying to find its own tail. And where there's time, there's consequence. That's Ananke, necessity. She wasn't a goddess in the human sense. She was more like gravity before physics had a name. The unbreakable truth that once something starts, it must continue. Together, time and necessity danced in the emptiness, two endless forces spiraling around each other like cosmic snakes. Their coils pressed against the void until finally something cracked. The Orphic poets said this is how creation began, not with fire or explosion, but with a squeeze. Kronos and Ananke wound themselves around existence so tightly that the first thing ever made, the cosmic egg, was born between them. Inside that egg were the seeds of everything: matter, life, gods, even the concept of direction. When it burst open, it scattered stars, elements, and the blueprint for the entire universe. And just like that, time didn't just exist, it started moving forward. Now this version of creation isn't from Hesiod's famous chaos story. It comes from a different tradition, the Orphic mysteries, a more secretive branch of Greek religion. To them, time wasn't just ticking. It was alive. It could create, destroy, and renew. Kronos wasn't a clock. He was an eternal motion, endless, self-consuming, like a loop that never ends. And Ananke wasn't destiny in the poetic sense. She was inevitability. She didn't grant wishes or punish sins. She just made sure that what must happen will happen. Think of it this way. If chaos is the canvas, Kronos is the brush, and Ananke is the law that says once you start painting, the picture has to form. Even the gods couldn't escape her. Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, all were bound by time and consequence, the children of inevitability. Their imagery as serpents wasn't random either. The Greeks saw the serpent as a symbol of cycles, shedding skin, rebirth, eternity. Kronos and Ananke were the first to coil and twist, setting that endless loop in motion. Day and night, birth and death, beginning and end. Every heartbeat, every season, every orbit of a planet, it's their spiral still echoing through time. What's beautiful about this myth is how eerily scientific it feels. The Greeks imagined invisible forces, time, pressure, and motion, bringing reality into being. It's like they sensed that creation wasn't an act of magic, but a chain reaction, one that began when time wrapped itself around possibility and refused to let go. So before the gods, before the heavens, before even chaos, there was a single, unstoppable truth. Once time began to move, the universe had no choice but to follow. Picture the entire universe trapped inside a single, shimmering egg. No stars, no sound, no gods, just a glowing shell floating in endless dark, trembling like it knows it's about to do something impossible. That was the beginning, according to one of Greece's oldest and strangest creation stories, the Orphic myth. This wasn't the kind of egg you'd fry for breakfast. It was the cosmic egg, laid in the heart of the void by time, chronos, and necessity, ananke, those two colossal serpents that wrapped around creation until it finally cracked open. Inside that egg was everything: sky, earth, fire, water, gods, life, even the idea of motion itself. But for an eternity, it just floated there, silent and waiting, like a seed that hadn't decided to sprout yet. And then it hatched. From the shell burst Phanes, also called Protagonos, the firstborn. He wasn't just light, he was light, a being made of radiant gold, covered in shining wings, crowned with fire, and carrying the entire potential of the cosmos within him. The poet said he had the heads of animals, humans, even birds, because he represented all forms of life, all possibilities at once. He was the first to feel joy, the first to move, the first to create. His name, Phanes, literally means the one who brings things to light, and that's exactly what he did. From him came night, or Nyx, then heaven, Uranos, earth, Gaia, and the chain of creation that would eventually give rise to Zeus and the rest of Olympus. But in the beginning, there was only Phanes, alone, shining, spreading order into what had once been silent emptiness. The egg itself split into two halves. One became the sky above, the other the earth below. It's a poetic way of saying the universe found its structure: up and down, day and night, light and dark. Everything we understand, every boundary that defines existence, began with that first crack. The symbolism here is beautiful. The Greeks imagined the cosmos like a living organism, enclosed, complete, full of potential. And when it hatched, creation wasn't forced or violent, it was natural. The world didn't explode into being, it was born. Like a chick breaking free from its shell, or a mind waking up from sleep. And it's not just Greece. Almost every ancient culture told a version of this story. The Egyptians spoke of a shining egg floating on the waters of none. In India, it was the Hiranyagarbha, the golden womb. Even in China, the god Pangu emerged from an egg of chaos. Somehow, across time and continents, humanity kept dreaming of creation as a hatching, the moment potential becomes reality. So maybe when that cosmic egg cracked open and light poured out for the first time, the Greeks weren't just talking about the birth of the universe. Maybe they were describing what it feels like when possibility finally becomes real. They say daylight makes the world visible, but it's the night that makes it feel alive. When the last flame fades and silence takes over, something ancient wakes up. Not monsters, not ghosts, but the first children ever born from darkness itself. Before the gods ruled Olympus, there was Erebus, the deep shadow that filled every corner chaos left behind, and Nyx, the goddess of night, wrapped in a veil of stars. They weren't evil, they were balanced, the gentle hush after creation's first noise. While the newborn cosmos glittered with light, night slipped quietly across the sky, painting the world in calm. From their union came no kings or warriors, but feelings, moments, and invisible forces. Their children weren't made of flesh, they were made of experiences. First came Aether, the bright upper air, and Hemera, the glow of day. Even the light had to be born from night. Then came the quieter ones, Hypnos, the god of sleep, drifting over the world on soft wings, closing mortal eyes so their minds could heal. Beside him came his twin, Death, gentle in some stories, merciless in others, but always near his brother's side. The Greeks never feared death as a villain. They saw him as sleep's older twin, inevitable, peaceful, and honest. But night had more children hidden in her folds. The Oneroi, the spirits of dreams, fluttered from her cavern each dusk, carrying visions into sleeping minds, some truthful, some cruel. Every dream you've ever had, they'd say, was a visit from one of these silent messengers. Mamos was born next, the spirit of blame that follows every mistake. And then came Eris, strife, the spark that turns peace into motion, ensuring the world never stays too still. Together, these children made the human condition: rest, death, imagination, conflict, regret. To the Greeks, these weren't abstract ideas. They were beings that walked unseen among them. When you fell asleep, Hypnos brushed his hand across your eyes. When you quarreled with a friend, Eris was the spark in your chest. When you blamed yourself, Mamos smiled from the shadows. They lived in the rhythm of every heart and every night. Even the gods respected Nyx. Zeus himself, ruler of thunder, once backed away from punishing her son because he feared the power of night. In their world, light might dazzle, but darkness commanded reverence. Maybe that's the lesson her myths were trying to teach. Night isn't emptiness, it's the hidden half of everything. Without it, we'd never rest, never dream, never end one day to begin another. Every dust is her reminder that even the brightest life needs moments of stillness, and that sleep, death, and dreams aren't opposites of life, but its quiet partners. Before love had a name, before hearts ever beat, something in the darkness began to move. Not a god, not a sound, just a quiet pull. The universe, still raw and unshaped, felt the first urge to reach for something other than itself. That was Eros, the oldest love, the first motion, the spark that made everything want to exist. Forget the image of a mischievous Cupid with tiny wings. That version came much later. In the beginning, Eros wasn't the son of Aphrodite. He was older than her, older than Zeus, older than the stars. He was born right out of chaos, alongside Gaia and Nyx, when existence itself was still deciding what it wanted to be. To the Greeks, he wasn't just the god of romance. He was the force of attraction. Every time dust became planets, or matter became life, or two souls drew close, that was Eros working silently behind the scenes. He wasn't about kisses or passion. He was the engine of creation, the urge that made the cosmos wake up and start moving. The poet Hesiod described him as the fairest among the deathless gods. But his beauty wasn't about appearance, it was energy. He represented the strange truth that everything, even stars, atoms, and minds, need connection to exist. Nothing thrives in isolation, not galaxies, not people. Eros was the thread that tied it all together. Later philosophers like Plato said Eros wasn't just a feeling, he was a bridge. He stood between humans and gods, pulling mortals upward through desire, curiosity, and love of beauty. That's why he's not just about affection, he's about the hunger to know, to create, to grow. Every invention, every act of art, every relationship begins with the same invisible spark the Greeks called eros. In some Orphic myths, he was known as Phanes, the Shining One, a radiant god who emerged from the cosmic egg and spread light across the universe. He carried both male and female qualities, symbolizing balance, creation and reception, action and rest, giver and receiver. He wasn't love in the romantic sense, he was life's will itself. When you think about it, that's strangely scientific too. The universe expanded because energy reached outward. Atoms formed because particles were drawn together. Planets hold orbit because gravity, that endless attraction, keeps them dancing. It's as if the Greeks were trying to describe the physics of desire long before science had words for it. So when they said Eros was first, they didn't mean a winged boy with arrows. They meant the moment the universe took its first breath, the pull that made light chase darkness and hearts chase one another. The cosmos didn't begin with a command. It began with a feeling, a spark that whispered, "Come closer." The first thing to ever exist wasn't light. It wasn't water or fire or even the stars. It was earth, breathing, endless, alive. She came from nothing, rising out of the void like a dream deciding it wanted to be real. The Greeks called her Gaia, and she wasn't just on the world, she was the world. Gaia didn't need a creator. She simply appeared, whole and silent, stretching in all directions. Her body was the ground, her breath the wind, her pulse the rhythm of seasons that didn't exist yet. She was the first being with weight, the foundation for everything that would ever stand. But even she, in all her vastness, felt something missing. Imagine being everything, yet feeling alone. So out of that loneliness, Gaia created Uranus, the sky. No gods helped her, no lightning struck. She willed him into being. A canopy of glittering stars stretched above her. He was light where she was shadow, motion where she was stillness. And when he finally unfolded across her body, the universe took its first shape, heaven above, earth below. Their love wasn't gentle or human. It was the joining of two infinite things, one rising, one falling, meeting in the middle to form balance. From their embrace came mountains, oceans, forests, and the pulse of life that still hums beneath our feet. Gaia was not only the mother of gods and titans, but of everything that could grow, breathe, or dream. To the Greeks, she wasn't just a deity to pray to. She was reality itself. When they touched the soil, they were touching her skin. When thunder rolled, it was Uranus speaking above her. Every harvest, every storm, every heartbeat came from their ancient bond, earth and sky locked in an endless embrace. But beneath that creation lies something deeper, Gaia's loneliness. Before she birthed Uranus, she was surrounded by nothing, no light, no sound, no one to answer her. Her act of creation wasn't just divine, it was emotional. It was longing taking form, desire becoming existence. Even the universe, it seems, began because something didn't want to be alone. And that's why Gaia's myth still feels human. She represents the instinct every living thing carries, the need to reach outward, to create, to connect. The same urge that makes a seed push through soil toward sunlight, or two strangers fall in love under a vast sky. The earth still does it. She still births new life from her surface, still yearns upward for the stars she once created. Gaia wasn't made of flesh or bone, but of will. She didn't wait for permission to exist. She decided to. And from her loneliness came the first partnership in the cosmos, a story so old that we're still living inside it. Every step we take, every breath we draw, is her creation echoing back, the earth remembering her first act of love. Before sailors sang to the waves, before storms had gods to steer them, the sea was already alive. It didn't roar yet, it breathed, a slow, endless rhythm that wrapped around the newborn earth like a heartbeat heard from underwater. That living ocean was Pontus, the first sea, the elder before all gods who would ever claim it. He wasn't born from thunder or war. He was born from Gaia, the earth herself. When she stretched and sighed in the dark of creation, her longing spilled outward, and that longing became water, endless, restless, deep. Pontus wasn't a man or a monster. He had no face, no crown, no trident. He simply was. The ocean in its purest form, motion without end. To the ancient Greeks, he was not the ruler of the sea. He was the sea. Poseidon would come much later, building palaces and waging tempests. But Pontus was older than all that. He didn't command the waves. He was their memory. Every current, every tide, every reflection of moonlight still carries a little piece of him. When Gaia and Pontus joined, they gave birth to the beings who define the ocean's moods. There was Nereus, the gentle old man of the sea, kind and wise. Thaumas, who embodied the wonder of the deep, the shimmer of sunlight through water. Phorcys and Ceto, who birthed the monsters that haunt sailors' nightmares. And Eurybia, the power of the sea's iron will, the storm's muscle, and the sailor's test. Together, they made the sea complete, nurturing, mysterious, and terrifying. Pontus didn't speak in words. His voice was the crash of waves against stone, the hiss of foam, the silence under the surface where no sound travels. When mortals first saw the horizon, that endless line of blue, they saw him, a god so vast he couldn't fit into a story. He represented more than water. He was change itself, the world's reminder that nothing stays still. Rivers move, clouds shift, hearts wander, all following the same law that he embodied. Even now, every tide pulling toward the moon is part of that original rhythm, that first heartbeat from when the world was young. The poet said Pontus had no temples because you couldn't build one big enough. His temple was the sea itself, every shore, every ripple, every storm. And maybe that's why his name has faded. He wasn't meant to be worshipped, only remembered. He was too old for prayer, too wide for praise. So next time you stand by the ocean and feel that quiet pull, that sense of something ancient watching from beneath, remember, that isn't just water. That's Pontus, the first sea, the memory of the moment Earth learned how to breathe. Before Olympus rose into legend, another mountain ruled the heavens. It didn't shimmer with marble palaces or songs of glory. It rumbled, it groaned, it breathed storms through its peaks. This was Mount Othrys, the fortress of the Titans, the first throne of divine power in the universe. When the sky god Uranus was overthrown by his own son Cronus, the new age began here. Othrys became the capital of the cosmos, a realm of raw stone and thunder, untouched by the delicate order that Zeus would one day bring. Here the Titans ruled, colossal beings older than time, each one embodying the world's bones, the ocean, the sun, the moon, memory, law, and strength. They weren't gods in the human sense. They were the laws of existence given form. And from this mountain Cronus sat as king, scythe in hand, presiding over the Golden Age, an era when mortals lived without pain, without war, and without aging. But even in paradise, fear lurked. Cronus had learned a prophecy that one of his own children would rise up to dethrone him, just as he had dethroned his father. So one by one, as his children were born, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and finally Zeus, he swallowed them whole. The laughter of new gods was silenced inside their father's stomach, while the world above stayed unnervingly still. Until Rhea, his weary queen, hid her youngest son, Zeus, deep within a cave. There, away from Othrys's shadow, the new world began to plot against the old. When Zeus came of age, he didn't just challenge his father. He declared war on everything Mount Othrys stood for. The war that followed, the Titanomachy, shook creation itself. For 10 years the sky split open with lightning and molten rock. The Titans hurled mountains, the Olympians answered with storms. Othrys against Olympus, the ancient against the young. It wasn't a battle for land, but for the right to define reality. In the end, Othrys fell. Zeus hurled the Titans down into Tartarus, the deepest abyss beneath the earth. Their cries echoed like earthquakes, and the mountain that once ruled the world was left in silence. From its ashes rose Mount Olympus, brighter, lighter, the symbol of a new divine order. But myths have long memories. The Greeks believed the ruins of Othrys still whispered in the wind, a low, distant growl beneath the clouds. It was a reminder that every order, no matter how golden, eventually crumbles. The same gods who overthrew their fathers would one day be challenged by their own children. It's the oldest story in existence, power giving birth to rebellion. So when people speak of Mount Olympus as eternal, they forget the mountain that came before. Othris may have fallen, but its shadow still lies beneath every thunderstorm, ancient, patient, and waiting. They were too big for the world to remember. 100 arms, 50 faces, and a strength so great that even the gods feared to speak their names aloud. They were called the Hekatoncheires, the 100-handed ones, and without them Zeus would never have won his war. Long before Olympus, before even the Titans ruled, the earth itself gave birth to them. Gaia, the mother of all, and Uranus, the sky above her, brought forth 3 colossal sons, Briareus, Cortus, and Gyges. They weren't cruel, they weren't evil, they were simply too much. Each one towered beyond the mountains, with 100 hands that could move storms and 50 heads that saw in every direction. They were living earthquakes, the raw power of nature given form. But even gods fear what they can't control. Uranus looked at his newborn sons and saw not creation but threat. So he chained them deep inside the earth, buried alive in the darkness of Tartarus, where their screams became the first thunder. Gaia wept. Her children, born of her own body, were trapped within it. She begged the Titans, their younger siblings, to free them, but only Cronus listened. He rose against Uranus, struck him down, and then, out of fear, locked the 100-handed ones away again. For ages they stayed there, silent, buried, forgotten, until a new voice called their names. When Zeus declared war on the Titans, the universe trembled for 10 years. Mount Othris and Mount Olympus hurled storms and stones at each other, neither side winning. Then Gaia spoke again, whispering to Zeus that his father's mistake was also his weakness. The war will never end until you free your brothers. So Zeus descended into Tartarus, where the air burned and the darkness screamed. He shattered the chains of the 100-handed ones, and for the first time in eternity they stretched their 100 arms and roared. The sound shook the cosmos. When they joined the battle, the sky itself split. Each of their hands grabbed a mountain, and they hurled them like stones at the Titans. The earth quaked with every throw. Lightning, rock, and chaos filled the world, until the Titans finally fell. After the war, Zeus made them guardians of Tartarus, to stand watch over the very gods they'd defeated. Their duty was eternal, not vengeance, but balance. And so, deep beneath the world they remain, 100 hands gripping the chains of eternity, making sure the old powers never rise again. Most stories forget them. They don't have temples or worshippers or gentle myths, but their strength is the reason order exists at all. Every mountain, every rumble of the earth, every echo from the deep It's their reminder that chaos never dies, it just sleeps. So when the ground shakes, maybe it's not just an earthquake. Maybe it's one of the 100-handed ones turning in his sleep, waiting for the world to need him again. Before thunder had a sound, before lightning ever struck, 3 brothers were already at work, hammering the sky itself. They lived in darkness, beneath the earth, where the heat of creation still burned. Each swing of their hammers made the world tremble. Sparks flew upward, and those sparks became stars. They were the Cyclopes, not the monsters of later tales, but the first craftsmen of the gods. Long before Zeus ruled Olympus, the Cyclopes were born from Gaia and Uranus, siblings to the Titans and the 100-handed ones. Their names were Brontes, thunder, Sterapes, lightning, and Argus, bright. They were huge, strong, and each had a single blazing eye in the center of their forehead. Not a deformity, but a mark of focus. That one eye saw everything at once, fire, metal, and divine truth. But Uranus, the Sky Father, feared their power. He looked upon them and saw not beauty, but threat. So like the 100-handed ones, he cast them down into Tartarus, locking them away in endless night. And there they stayed, the greatest makers in the universe, forgotten under mountains of stone. Then came Zeus, young and hungry for vengeance. When he rose against his father, Gaia whispered the same secret she once gave to Cronus. "Set your brothers free." So Zeus broke open the depths of the earth and released the Cyclopes from their chains. In return, they did what they were born to do. They created. From the molten fires of the earth, they forged the 3 greatest weapons ever made. For Zeus, they built the thunderbolts, pure lightning captured in divine metal, the weapon that would crown him king. For Poseidon, they crafted the trident, a 3-pronged spear that could shatter rock and summon earthquakes with a single strike. And for Hades, they made the helm of invisibility, allowing him to move unseen, even among death itself. With those gifts, the 3 brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, conquered the Titans, reshaping the world forever. The Cyclopes never asked for worship or reward. They returned to their forges, content to create in silence. While gods ruled from golden thrones, the Cyclopes stayed in the heat and dust, tending the heartbeat of the world. Every lightning bolt that split the sky was said to be one of their sparks escaping heaven's forge. Later stories would twist them into monsters, like Polyphemus, the man-eating brute who met Odysseus. But those were shadows of the originals. The true Cyclopes were builders, inventors, divine engineers who turned chaos into structure. They proved that power isn't only in ruling, it's in making. So the next time thunder rolls or lightning flashes across the clouds, listen closely. That isn't anger. That's the echo of 3 forgotten brothers, still hammering the heavens, still building the tools of God. At the far edge of the world, where the sea melts into the sky, the ancient Greeks believed there was a river that never stopped moving. It circled the entire earth like a silver belt, flowing in an eternal loop. That river had a name, Okeanos, the Titan older than gods, older than the idea of distance itself. To the Greeks, the world wasn't a spinning globe. It was a wide, flat disk floating in water. And beyond every horizon ran this single, endless current. The sun sailed across it by day, dipping into its waters at night, only to rise again from the east. Every stream, every raindrop, every tide that touched the shore came from this one source. Okeanos wasn't in the sea. He was the sea that surrounded all seas. He was born of Gaia and Uranus, brother to the Titans who once ruled the heavens. But unlike his brothers, Okeanos never sought the throne. While Kronos sharpened his sickle and Zeus raised his lightning, Okeanos stayed still, his waters circling the world in silence. He was the Titan who refused to take sides, who understood that power comes and goes, but the tide always returns. His wife was Tethys, the mother of all rivers and streams. Together they had thousands of children, the Potamoi, river gods who carried life through the land, and the Oceanids, nymphs of every spring and waterfall. Through them, Okeanos's pulse reached every corner of the earth. When a shepherd drank from a brook, or a sailor felt spray on his face, they were touching the veins of the same ancient Titan. Unlike Poseidon, who ruled storms and claimed dominion over sailors, Okeanos was beyond ownership. He didn't strike tridents or roar with waves. He simply existed, patient, endless, unstoppable. Even Zeus, king of the sky, was said to honor him. Some myths say the gods would swear oaths by Okeanos because he was the one thing too vast to lie to. But Okeanos was more than geography. He was philosophy made of water, the idea that life moves in cycles, that everything flows into something else. He was the river of time, the circle of return. When you die, the poet said, your soul crosses his stream toward the afterlife, carried one last time by the current that began it all. Stand by any ocean, and you can still feel him. The horizon that seems to go on forever, that's his shoulder. The wind that pushes the waves toward you, that's his breath. Okeanos doesn't rage or command. He remembers. He's the quiet proof that before gods built thrones or men drew maps, the world already had its border, a river so wide it held everything inside it. And it still does. Before the first thunderbolt was ever forged, before Zeus even drew his first breath, one voice had already seen how it would all unfold. She didn't shout, she didn't fight, she simply knew. Her name was Themis, and she was one of the eldest Titans, daughter of the earth and the sky, born from balance itself. While her brothers warred and her sisters ruled over oceans and fire, Themis governed something far quieter but infinitely stronger: order. Not the kind of law written in stone, but the rhythm of the universe, sunrise followed by night, cause followed by consequence, every action meeting its echo. The Greeks said Themis never guessed the future, she understood it. She saw patterns in eternity like threads in a tapestry, each knot connected to another. And even before the Titanomachy, before the first rebellion, she saw what was coming. When Cronus took the throne by cutting down his father Uranus, Themis warned him, "You have repeated your father's sin. One day your own child will rise against you." But Cronus, swollen with victory, laughed at her prophecy. Why listen to quiet truth when you have the crown of the universe? So he swallowed his children one by one, trying to silence destiny with fear. But Themis's words couldn't be buried. They weren't just a prediction. They were a law of nature. The same pattern that had undone Uranus would now undo Cronus. Every rise carries its fall in its shadow. When Zeus grew strong enough to challenge his father, Themis didn't pick a side out of loyalty. She chose inevitability. She joined the Olympians because she understood that the universe needed to move forward. Stagnation, even under gods, is just another kind of chaos. When the war ended, Zeus made her his counselor, not because he conquered her, but because she was the one Titan too wise to conquer. Some myths say she even helped design the laws of Olympus, the rules that would govern gods and mortals alike. Others whisper that she was the first voice of Delphi, the oracle before Apollo. Her prophecies came not from trance or madness, but from balance. She simply knew when something had reached its limit. Even Zeus, mighty as he was, sometimes feared her calm gaze, because when Themis spoke, there was no debate left, only truth. But over time, her voice grew quiet. The gods of thunder and beauty, war and love took center stage, and wisdom was no longer fashionable. She didn't vanish, she just stepped back, letting the next cycle begin. Because she knew even Zeus's empire would one day fade, like every order before it. Her story isn't about war or revenge, it's about inevitability. That still unshakable law that keeps the stars from colliding and pride from lasting forever. Themis didn't need to fight to win. She only needed to wait. And in the end, the universe always proves her right. Before Apollo ever held a lyre, or Zeus threw lightning across the sky, there was light. Pure, wordless light, and that light had a name, Hyperion. He was one of the 12 Titans, son of the earth and the sky, and his name meant he who goes above. Where others ruled stone and sea, Hyperion ruled brilliance, the glow that crowned the heavens before the first sunrise. He was not the sun itself, but its essence, the divine radiance that made sight, warmth, and awareness possible. To the Greeks, he was the very act of illumination, the moment the universe learned how to see. From his union with Theia, the goddess of shining light and vision, came 3 children who would give form to time itself. First came Helios, the sun, whose fiery horses pulled his golden chariot across the sky each day. Then Selene, the moon, who followed her brother's path across the night, gliding quietly through the stars. And finally Eos, the dawn, rosy-fingered and gentle, who opened the gates of heaven every morning so her brother could rise again. Together they became the heartbeat of the cosmos, day, night, and the moment between. The world turned not because it spun, but because their cycle never stopped. Helios's fire brought life and truth. Selene's calm light soothed the world after its burning, and Eos's touch promised that even darkness could begin again. To the ancients, Hyperion's family was more than myth. It was rhythm. They explained the passage of time, the comfort of routine, the promise that even in chaos there would always be light returning. When the Greeks watched the first rays of dawn spill over the mountains, they saw Eos's tears sparkling on the grass, the morning dew. When they looked at the moon's reflection on the sea, they whispered Selene's name. And when thunderclouds broke to reveal sunlight again, they knew Hyperion's line had not faltered. In the Titanomachy, the great war between old and new gods, Hyperion fought alongside his siblings and lost. But unlike many who fell into Tartarus, his legacy never vanished. The light he gave the world couldn't be chained. Every sunrise was proof that even in defeat, his family's power endured, because nothing can conquer illumination. It returns every day, quietly and without permission. Hyperion's children taught the world the pattern that all life still follows: to rise, to fade, to rise again. The Greeks saw that rhythm not just in the sky, but in themselves: birth, death, renewal, the eternal cycle of light and shadow. So each morning, when the horizon begins to blush and the sky glows gold, you're watching the oldest story ever told replay itself. It's not just dawn, it's Eos waking, it's Helios climbing, it's Selene retreating with grace, and somewhere high above, the Titan Hyperion watches, the first light still shining from the edge of eternity. High above the chaos of gods and war, beyond thunder and sea, there is another kingdom, silent, cold, and unchanging. The ancient Greeks looked up at it every night, tracing the same glittering patterns across the darkness. They believed those stars weren't random. Someone had placed them there. Someone was keeping watch. His name was Krios, the Titan of the constellations, the one who held the heavens steady. He was one of the 12 original Titans, born from the union of earth and sky, Gaia and Uranus. While his brothers ruled the sea, the light, and the horizon, Krios ruled something more distant, the quiet machinery of the cosmos. He didn't command storms or flame. He commanded direction. Every star that drifted, every constellation that rose and fell with the seasons, did so by his unseen hand. Krios was never loud. He was the kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself. In a universe full of thunder and prophecy, he was the pattern that made it all make sense. He was order, not control, the calm rhythm that turned chaos into cosmos. He was said to govern the southern sky, the realm of winter constellations, where the air grows thin and the nights stretch longer. His wife was Eurybia, mistress of the sea's hidden power, and together they had 3 children, each one carrying a piece of his cosmic design. Astraeus, who became the father of the stars and the winds, spreading light and motion through the heavens. Pallas, symbol of warcraft and strategy, representing order in battle. And Perses, the force of destruction that clears the way for rebirth. Through them, Krios's influence stretched across heaven, earth and storm, quiet but absolute. Unlike his fiery brothers, Krios took no throne and started no wars. Even during the Titanocemy, the Great Rebellion, his role was uncertain. Some say he fought beside the Titans. Others say he simply turned the stars and watched history repeat itself. Maybe that's fitting, because Krios was the kind of god you don't pray to. You look through him every time you look up. The Greeks believed the night sky was a living calendar, one written by Krios himself. Sailors used his stars to find their way across the sea. Farmers watched his constellations to know when to plant or harvest. He never needed temples or hymns. His worship was in observation. Every twinkling light was a silent hymn to his precision. But time has a way of forgetting those who keep order. Krios faded into the background of myth, replaced by brighter stories, gods of love, war, and thunder. Yet every clear night, when the constellations wheel in perfect rhythm, he's still there, the invisible axis turning the sky. So the next time you stand beneath the stars, remember that before Apollo's light or Zeus's storms, there was a Titan who drew the map of heaven. He never needed followers or glory. He only needed the dark. Because that's where Krios still lives, in the quiet balance between light and nothingness. Before stories were written, before names were carved in stone, there was a Titaness who carried the past inside her mind. Her name was Mnemosyne, and she was not a goddess of war or sky or ocean. She ruled something invisible but eternal. She was memory itself, the bridge between yesterday and forever. To the ancient Greeks, Mnemosyne was one of the oldest powers in the universe. Without her, there would be no history, no songs, no meaning, only silence, starting over every sunrise. The world would forget itself each night, but Mnemosyne made remembering sacred. She kept the past alive in words, in minds, and in hearts, long before ink ever touched paper. When Zeus sought wisdom beyond his throne, he came to her. For 9 nights they lay together, and from their union were born 9 daughters, the Muses. They became the goddesses of art, poetry, astronomy, music, and history. Every voice that sang, every poet who spoke, every thinker who dreamed was guided by them. And they all came from Mnemosyne, the mother of inspiration, the keeper of every story ever told. In an age before books, the Greeks believed memory was the soul of civilization. Their bards, the storytellers, would stand before crowds and recite thousands of verses from heart, weaving myth, history, and prayer into one living thread. They didn't just remember facts, they remembered feelings, rhythm, and truth. That gift was Mnemosyne's, the power to carry worlds inside the mind. Her twin opposite was Lethe, the river of forgetfulness that flowed through the underworld. Drink from Lethe, and you forget who you are. But drink from Mnemosyne, and memory returns, your life, your love, your purpose. Even in death, she offered awakening, to remember your true self before being reborn. Through her, memory became more than recollection. It became resurrection. Every time a myth was retold, it lived again. Every time a name was spoken, it refused to vanish. To remember something, Mnemseen taught, was to keep it alive. That's why the Greeks saw forgetting not as peace, but as a kind of second death. When you think about it, she's still here, in every story told, in every song that survives its singer. Our entire history, our art, our culture, all of it stands on the foundation she built. She didn't build temples or thrones. She built continuity. And in doing so, she made humanity immortal. So when someone remembers your name, your story, or even a moment of kindness, that's her, working quietly. Mnemseen, the mother of the muses, the mind of the universe, and the reason nothing beautiful is ever truly lost. Long before Apollo strummed his lyre, before Artemis hunted by moonlight, the world already knew how to think. Its first thoughts weren't spoken, they glowed. They moved through the stars like quiet questions, looking for answers. Those thoughts belonged to Koios and Phoebe, the titans of intellect and prophecy, the ancestors of divine reason itself. Koios was born of Gaia and Uranus, the earth and the sky. He wasn't strength or storm, but focus, the cosmic axis around which the heavens turned. He represented the mind of the universe, the awareness that gives direction to all creation. Where others ruled elements, Koios ruled the invisible, thought, logic, and insight. He was the moment consciousness began to wonder why. His sister and wife, Phoebe, was the light to his thought, the titaness of radiant prophecy and clarity. Her name means bright, not in color, but in understanding. She was the calm certainty that follows realization, the kind of wisdom that doesn't shout, it simply is. Together they were the first philosophers of heaven. He asked, she knew, and between them flowed the intelligence that would one day shape gods and humans alike. Their daughter was Leto, a goddess of gentle grace and silence. And through her, the legacy of thought and vision became incarnate in Apollo and Artemis, the twins of reason and intuition, sunlight and moonlight, balance and reflection. Apollo's brilliance, his music, his prophecy, all traced back to Phoebe. Artemis's insight, her independence, her calm, those came from Koios. Their blood carried the universe's oldest truth, that wisdom isn't born in noise, but in quiet alignment. Before Delphi ever spoke in riddles, it belonged to Phoebe. She was the first oracle, her voice guiding gods through silence and stars. When she passed it to her grandson, Apollo, the torch of prophecy passed from Titan to Olympian, the old mind giving way to the new voice. Even Zeus, in all his thunder, needed those voices of reason. Without them, the heavens would have been full of light, but no understanding. The Greeks saw in Koios and Phoebe a kind of divine symmetry, thought and revelation, inquiry and intuition. They didn't fight wars or shape storms, they shaped perspective. They were the architects of meaning, the reason the cosmos wasn't chaos, but conversation. And though their names have faded, their influence hasn't. Every spark of insight, every moment of clarity, every prophecy that ever came true, all of it began with them. When you watch the stars turn in the night sky, that slow and perfect motion, that's Queus still guiding the heavens. And when something deep inside you suddenly knows, that's Phoebe whispering the answer. Together they remind us that even the gods needed teachers, and before there was light, there was understanding. They say there was once a time when the world didn't need gods. No storms, no hunger, no pain. The earth gave everything freely, and humans walked through eternal spring. It was a time of laughter without struggle, of light without shadow. And ruling over it all was Cronus, the youngest Titan, the one who had freed the world from his father's tyranny. He was called the Lord of the Golden Age. Cronus had risen from rebellion. With a curved blade forged by his mother Gaia, he struck down Uranus, the sky, and ended the first reign of cruelty. In his place, he promised peace. And for a while, the world kept its promise. Under Cronus's rule, mortals lived without sorrow. No one aged, no one toiled. The earth bloomed without need of seed or plow. It was said that men and women lived as children of the soil, gentle, carefree, and eternal. Even the gods had no need for temples, because everything was sacred. It was perfection, so pure it frightened the future. But Cronus was not just a king. He was time itself, Chronos, and time by its nature cannot stay still. Even in the brightest peace, he heard the ticking of his own undoing. Because from the moment he overthrew his father, the same prophecy hung over him. As you have done, so shall it be done to you. One of your own children will rise against you. At first, he tried to ignore it. Then he tried to outthink it. But time doesn't forget, and neither did he. When his wife Rhea bore their first child, Cronus took the newborn in his hands, kissed its forehead, and swallowed it whole. He told himself it was mercy, that by consuming the future he could keep the present safe. But with each child, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, the silence in heaven grew heavier. The golden age became colder, like sunlight fading at the end of day. Rhea wept for her children, and the earth began to feel sorrow for the first time. Even the mortals below sensed something changing, a stillness that no longer comforted but smothered. Time had stopped moving, and in its stillness, paradise began to rot. When the youngest child Zeus was born, Rhea could bear it no longer. She hid him away and gave Cronus a stone instead. He swallowed it, and for a moment time fooled itself. But time always catches up. Zeus would grow, and the age of peace would crumble like gold turning to dust. The golden age didn't end in fire or war. It ended the way all ages do, slowly, quietly, inevitably, because Cronus ruled time itself, and time, no matter how kind or wise, always devours its own children. They say the war between the Titans and the gods lasted 10 years. But ask 10 mountains where it happened, and you'll get 10 different answers. Every valley, every island, every storm in Greece still whispers, it happened here. It began when Zeus rose from hiding, a son born of rebellion, to challenge his father Cronus. The Titans ruled from Mount Othrys, the Olympians from Mount Olympus, 2 mountains staring each other down across the world. And between them stretched a battlefield that wasn't made of earth, but of sky, sea, and flame. The war lasted a decade of thunder. For 10 years the heavens split open, and the land itself trembled beneath divine fury. Lightning became weapons, mountains became shields, rivers boiled into steam, forests burned to ash, and stars fell like sparks from the forge of the Cyclopes. Even the oceans fled their shores as Poseidon hurled tsunamis against his uncles, the elder Titans. There was no sunrise, only flashes of fire across an endless storm. In Thessaly, they say the final battle took place, the Titans hurling whole mountains as weapons, while the 100-handed ones answered with 300 more. In Arcadia, people still point to jagged peaks and claim they were the bodies of fallen Titans, turned to stone by Zeus's lightning. In Euboea, the locals tell of forests that burned for 10 years straight, where the smell of smoke became part of the soil. In Crete, they swear that when Zeus was a child, the earth shook with the Titan's footsteps far away, the first thunder he would one day command. And in Thrace, rivers still ran red after storms, said to carry the blood of Cronus's armies. Every region remembered the war differently, because every region carried its scars. To the ancients, these weren't myths, they were memories written into the land. A cracked mountain, a fallen Titan. A lightning-split tree, the mark of Zeus's wrath. The world itself was the battlefield, and every rock, every river, every gust of wind still belonged to it. For 10 years, neither side won, until Zeus did something no Titan dared. He looked downward into Tartarus and freed the 100-handed ones, those buried giants of chaos. With 100 arms each, they hurled mountains like stones. The sky shattered with the sound of it. And when the dust cleared, the Titans were gone, cast into the abyss, locked beneath the very earth they once ruled. The war was over, but the world never forgot. Every time thunder rolls through the mountains, the Greeks said it was the echo of that ancient war, the clash between old order and new. And when the wind howls through narrow valleys, it's the sound of the Titans still struggling in the dark, trying to lift the sky once more. Atlas wasn't crushed by the sky. He was condemned to keep it from falling. When the war of gods and Titans finally ended, the earth was cracked, the seas were boiling, and the stars themselves still trembled. The Titans were thrown into the depths of Tartarus, but one of them, the strongest, was spared that darkness. Atlas, general of Cronus's armies, stood unbowed even in defeat. So Zeus gave him a punishment worthy of his defiance. He sent Atlas to the farthest edge of the world, the place where the ocean met the sky, and there the Titan was told to hold the heavens apart from the earth. not lift them, not bear their weight, but keep them from touching forever. Because if heaven ever fell back to earth, the world would return to chaos. Creation itself would collapse into the same silence that existed before the first dawn. And so Atlas became the hinge of the cosmos, the living pillar between everything above and everything below. He knelt, shoulders bowed, hands gripping the horizon. The stars pressed against his back. The wind roared in his ears. Each breath was an age, each heartbeat a century. He wasn't just enduring gravity, he was enduring eternity. To mortals, he became a mountain at the end of the world, a shape too still to seem alive. Sailors who reached the western sea swore they saw him there, silhouetted against the dying sun, a giant locked beneath the heavens. At night, they said, the constellations shifted slightly, as if the Titan were adjusting his burden. Artists later painted him holding a globe, a perfect sphere of stars and continents. But that image was mercy compared to the truth. Atlas wasn't carrying a planet. He was carrying separation itself, the invisible tension that keeps every realm in its place. He held not weight, but distance. He kept the divine from falling into the mortal, the sky from crushing the soil, order from unraveling into void. That's what made his punishment eternal. He could never rest because the world could never stop needing him. Even Zeus, the one who condemned him, relied on his strength. Without Atlas, the throne of heaven would collapse into the sea. And so the rebel became the foundation. The conqueror's enemy became the world's spine. Every sunrise, every nightfall, every gust of wind between heaven and earth, that's Atlas still holding the line. He doesn't speak, he doesn't rage, he simply endures. The poets said his knees rooted into the ground and his sweat became rivers. But maybe that's not tragedy. Maybe that's devotion. Because somewhere, in the silent balance between sky and soil, Atlas is still there, shouldering the space that keeps everything else standing. Deep beneath the earth, farther than the dead can fall, there is a place so dark even shadows forget themselves. The Greeks called it Tartarus, not just a pit, but a god, a living void beneath all things. It lies below Hades, below the underworld, below everything that breathes or burns. And that's where the Titans were cast after the war. When the Olympians finally defeated their ancient parents, Zeus did not kill them, because Titans cannot die. He did something worse. He buried them alive in eternity. Kronos, Iapetus, Coeus, Hyperion, and the rest were thrown into Tartarus, bound in chains forged from the bones of the world itself. The walls were of bronze, the gates of fire, and the air was of silence. Down there, light itself had to crawl. Zeus ordered that 3 beings would stand guard forever, the 100-handed ones, or Hecatoncheires. Their names were Briareos, Cottus, and Gyges, each with 100 arms, 50 heads, and the strength to crush mountains. Once they too had been prisoners, locked away by Uranus for being too monstrous. Now, freed by Zeus, they became the jailers of their former masters. It's said they sit at the edge of the abyss, one on each side of Tartarus's gate. Their many eyes never close, their hands never rest. When the Titans stir in their chains, the Hekaponkores strike the ground, and the sound becomes an earthquake. The Greeks believed that every tremor, every distant rumble beneath the earth was the sound of God still struggling in the dark. Tartarus was not meant to punish mortals. It was built for immortals, beings too powerful to destroy, too dangerous to release. The prison was as old as creation and as deep as fear itself. If you fell from heaven for 9 days straight, the poet said, you would reach the earth on the 10th. But if you fell 9 more days from there, you'd finally land in Tartarus. It wasn't below, it was beyond. Down there, the Titans do not age, they do not die, they simply remember. They remember the light they once ruled, the skies they once commanded, the silence that replaced their voices. Time does not move in Tartarus, it circles. Each echo is a reminder of what they were and what they will never be again. Sometimes during great storms, or when the earth shakes, the Greeks would look to the ground and whisper, "The old gods are stirring." Because even in defeat, the Titans never truly vanished. They are still there, beneath every mountain, under every sea, caught between the cracks of the world. And as long as the earth stands, the 100-handed ones will stand with it, keeping watch, keeping order, and keeping the old gods in their endless dark. Before Zeus ruled the skies, before his thunderbolts shook the mountains, he was just a child, hidden away on an island, crying softly in the dark. The king of the gods began his life in fear. His father, Kronos, had been warned by prophecy that one of his own children would overthrow him. So each time his wife Rhea gave birth, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, Kronos opened his jaws and swallowed the newborn whole. To him it was simple. If he devoured the future, it would never arrive. But when Rhea became pregnant again, her grief turned into rebellion. She fled to the island of Crete, guided by the whispers of the earth herself. There, hidden deep inside a cave on Mount Ida, she gave birth to her last child, Zeus. The cave was alive with silence. Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth, carried it to Kronos, and placed it in his hands. The Titan swallowed it without hesitation, and fate laughed quietly in the dark. While Kronos feasted on stone, the true heir of the heavens was hidden far away, small, fragile, and human in his helplessness. Zeus was raised in secret by the nymphs Adrasteia and Ida, daughters of the earth. They fed him honey and sweet fruit, and sang lullabies that sounded like wind moving through leaves. He was nursed by the goat Amalthea, whose milk was said to glow with divine light. Her curved horns were filled with endless nourishment, the first symbol of abundance, the cornucopia. When Amalthea died, Zeus placed her among the stars to thank her. She became the constellation Capricorn, forever watching over him. Outside the cave, the Kuretes, armored spirits of Crete, danced and clashed their bronze shields in rhythm, a chorus of noise to hide the baby's cries from Kronos. To human ears it sounded like battle, but it was actually a song, the song of survival. Each clash of bronze was a heartbeat protecting the future. Zeus grew in the shadows, surrounded by the hum of nature, by whispers of wind and laughter of nymphs. He learned silence, patience, and the quiet strength of waiting, virtues no god had ever known before him. And when he was finally grown, he left that cave on Mount Ida not as a child, but as the storm himself. The baby who cried in secret would become the god who made the heavens roar. Every thunderclap that follows a storm is the echo of that hidden beginning, a reminder that even the ruler of Olympus once had to be silent, once had to hide, once had to wait for his time. Because even for gods, destiny doesn't arrive in lightning. It starts in the dark with a whisper, a heartbeat, and the milk of a mountain goat. In the dark heart of a Cretan cave, a newborn god cried. His name was Zeus, the last child of Cronus, the one destined to end an age. But above that cave, his father's hunger still ruled the heavens. One sound from the baby, one echo of his voice, and Cronus would find him, and the prophecy would end before it began. So the curates came. They were not men, they were spirits of rhythm and war, wild, bronze-clad guardians born from the heartbeat of the earth itself. Their armor shone like lightning, their spears glimmered like fire, and their dance was older than battle. They surrounded the cave and began to move. The first step was soft, a foot pressing into dust, then another, then the crash of bronze on bronze, a shiver that rolled through the mountain. Shields struck shields, spears scraped stone. The sound grew until it filled the cave like thunder. Each clash of metal was a promise Cronus will not hear. Each stomp of the earth was a vow the child will live. They danced not for beauty, but for silence. Every motion was timed to the rhythm of the infant's breath. When he whimpered, they clanged louder. When he laughed, they stomped harder. Their bodies became the wall between life and doom, a fortress made of sound. The nymphs caring for Zeus fed him honey and goat's milk, but it was the curates who gave him safety. Their war dance was constant, endless, tireless. It was the first music of defiance, the world's oldest lullaby. The cave shook, the air trembled, and outside Cronus heard only the storm of bronze. To the mortals who lived later, the curates became legend, warriors, priests, dancers. Their movements were remembered in ancient rituals, reenacted for centuries as a symbol of divine protection. Some said their rhythm became the heartbeat of drums in temples. Others said their steps echoed in every soldier who ever marched to war. But in truth, their dance was never about violence. It was about guarding hope through chaos. And when Zeus grew strong enough to leave that cave, the curates vanished into myth. Their shields rusted into the soil. Their footsteps became part of the earth's pulse. But on quiet nights, when thunder rolls across mountains, you can still hear them, the echo of bronze and rhythm keeping time with destiny. They didn't sing hymns or build temples. They didn't pray for peace. They created a storm and called it love. And from that storm, a god survived. Because the curates didn't just protect Zeus, they protected the future itself by making enough noise to save the world from silence. Zeus didn't always rule with wisdom. He had to swallow it first. Before Athena ever raised a spear, before Olympus crowned him king, there was Metis, the Titaness of cunning thought. She wasn't loud or fierce or divine in her thunder. She was clever, the kind of intelligence that waits, observes, and strikes when the storm has already passed. Metis was one of the Oceanides, daughters of Oceanus and Thetis, born from the current of thought itself. She was not beauty or chaos. She was strategy. She taught gods to think before they acted, to win not by strength, but by foresight. When Zeus waged war against his father Cronus, it was Metis who whispered the plan that changed the universe. She told him to free the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones, imprisoned deep in Tartarus. In gratitude, the Cyclopes forged thunderbolts for Zeus, the weapon that would end the Titan age. Without her, the storm would never have been born. After victory came peace, and peace gave way to desire. Zeus married Metis, drawn to her mind as much as her power. But fate, as always, was listening. A prophecy came, soft but unrelenting. The first child Metis bears will be wiser than its father. The second will overthrow him. Zeus froze. He had just defeated a god who had swallowed his children to stop a prophecy. And now the same shadow stood before him. He did what all rulers do when faced with fear. He tried to control it. When Metis became pregnant, Zeus spoke gently to her, asked her to come close, and in one perfect moment of divine cunning, he swallowed her whole. She didn't scream. She simply vanished. But Metis did not die. She became a whisper inside his skull, the voice of strategy, of patience, of thought. Zeus ruled, but he never ruled alone. Every wise decision, every stroke of insight that defined Olympus, it was her, still thinking from within. And then came the pain. A terrible pressure split his head like the sky before lightning. The gods fled in fear, and Hephaestus, the blacksmith of heaven, struck Zeus's skull with his hammer. Out burst Athena, fully grown and fully armed, shouting a war cry that shook the mountains. She was the daughter of Zeus, but her mind was Metis's, born not from the womb, but from thought itself, born from the fear that tried to destroy her. Zeus had swallowed wisdom, but it refused to stay silent. It reshaped itself, clothed itself in armor, and stepped into the light. And that's the secret buried in every myth of power. You can consume intellect, you can cage it, you can fear it, but you can never kill it. It only waits, quietly, to be reborn. When the Titans fell, the earth screamed, and from that scream her new army was born. Their name was Gigantes, the giants, sons of Gaia, mother of all things, and the blood of Uranus spilled when Cronus struck him down. That blood soaked into the soil, mixing divine power with pain, and from it rose creatures that no god could ever forget. They were taller than trees, their skins streaked with molten earth, their hair made of smoke. Each heartbeat sounded like thunder underfoot. They were not gods, not mortals. They were the rage of the world given shape. When Zeus and his siblings cast the Titans into Tartarus, Gaia felt the wound cut deep. Her firstborn were buried alive beneath creation. She wept, and her tears turned to storms. But sorrow became anger, and from that anger came war. The giants crawled out from mountains, tearing roots from their shoulders, dragging rivers behind them. They lifted whole peaks and hurled them at the sky. Their war cry rolled through the valleys, "Free our brothers!" The gods looked down from Olympus and saw the earth rising to devour them. Zeus hurled lightning, Poseidon split the sea, and Athena descended with a shield bright as the sun. But the giants would not fall. Their flesh was made of the world itself, and what god could kill the earth? The oracle spoke, "No god alone may slay them. Only the hand of mortal blood can end the giant's wrath." And so Zeus called upon his son, Heracles, the bridge between heaven and mankind. With his bow he fought beside the immortals, one mortal among gods, his arrows burning like comets. Together they turned the tide. Enceladus was struck down and buried beneath Sicily. His fury still burns there as Etna's fire. Porphyrion fell to Zeus's thunderbolt, his body becoming the mountains of Thrace. Every island, every volcano, every trembling hill became a tomb for a fallen giant. When the war was over, the earth grew silent again, but never peaceful. Gaia had lost another generation. The Titans below, the giants above, both buried by the same gods she once nurtured. And from that day, the Greeks said, the earth never forgot. Every quake was her memory shaking loose, every eruption her breath of anger breaking through. The Olympians built monuments to their victory, temples carved with the images of giants falling beneath divine light. But those carvings tell only half the story, because the Gigantomachy wasn't just war, it was balance. The sky had risen too high, the earth had reached too far, and the clash between them gave the world its shape. So when the ground trembles beneath your feet, remember, it's not just the shifting of stone. It's the sound of Gaia's children still stirring in the dark, still dreaming of the day the earth takes back her sky. When the giants fell, the world grew quiet, too quiet. The gods thought the war was over, that the sky would stay theirs forever. But the earth never forgave. She had lost too many children, Titans in chains, giants buried beneath mountains, and her grief curdled into fury. So from the depths of her sorrow and the black fire of Tartarus, she gave birth to her last son. His name was Typhon, and even the gods trembled when they spoke it. He wasn't like the Titans or the giants before them. He was older, darker, the storm-given body, the end-given wings. From his shoulders sprouted 100 serpent heads, each breathing fire. His eyes burned like suns. His voice was a choir of monsters, lions, dragons, and men screaming all at once. When he opened his mouth, the sky shook. When he walked, mountains cracked like eggshells. And when he rose from the plains of Cilicia, even Olympus felt the wind of his coming. Zeus watched from his throne as the horizon caught fire. Rivers boiled, seas fled their shores, forests turned to ash, the air itself rebelled, storms devouring storms until nothing was left but noise. And for the first time, the king of gods felt something he hadn't known since childhood: fear. The gods fled to Egypt, hiding in the shapes of animals. Only later did Zeus return, thunderbolt in hand, to face the monster that even Gaia called my vengeance. Their clash shook creation. Lightning struck fire, wind split mountains, thunder met hurricane, and the sky screamed itself apart. Typhon struck Zeus down, tore the tendons from his hands and feet, and hid them in a cave guarded by serpents. For a brief moment, the heavens were silent, the throne of Olympus empty. The earth had won. But Hermes and Pan found Zeus, freed him, and returned his strength. The storm returned, louder than before. Zeus unleashed his full fury, 1,000 bolts, a storm so vast it turned night into white flame. The world shook, and the monster fell. Typhon was hurled into the ground, crushed beneath Mount Etna. And from that day, every eruption was his breath, every tremor his restless hand clawing toward the surface. The Greeks said that when the mountain spits fire, that's Typhon remembering the sky. When thunder rolls across the sea, that's Zeus remembering the day he almost lost it. Because that battle was never just between gods and monsters. It was between order and chaos, rule and rebellion, fear and fire. And though Typhon sleeps beneath stone, the earth still remembers her last roar. The gods may have won the heavens, but the ground beneath them still burns. There was once a night when Zeus, king of the gods, awoke in chains. It wasn't the work of titans or giants this time. The enemies were closer. They were family. After all his wars, after defeating his father, the titans, and even the earth herself, Zeus believed his rule was eternal. He had divided the world among his brothers. Poseidon took the sea, Hades took the underworld, and Zeus took the sky. But what he didn't divide was power. He kept it all. The gods began to whisper. They called him a tyrant, the same word once used for Uranus, the same curse that had doomed Kronos. Every rebellion, it seemed, was only one generation away from being repeated. It started quietly. Hera, his wife and queen, grew tired of his infidelity and arrogance. Poseidon, his brother, resented being treated like a subordinate. And even Athena, the daughter of his mind, began to question his judgment. Together they decided to do what no mortal dared: overthrow the king of Olympus. On a night without stars, while Zeus slept upon his throne of gold, they crept through the marble halls of heaven. Their voices were low, their hearts steady. They forged chains of adamantine, unbreakable metal, bright as lightning, but stronger than pride. And as the sky slept, they bound him. When Zeus awoke, his thunder was silent. The chains bit into his wrists, and the throne that once shook with storms now trembled with disbelief. His own family stood before him, not with swords, but with judgment. It was a trial without a jury, a rebellion disguised as justice. But fate, as always, found its irony. A sea nymph named Thetis heard of the coup and raced to warn Briareus, one of the 100-handed ones, the same ancient being Zeus had freed from Tartarus long ago. Briareus stormed into Olympus, his 100 arms tearing the chains apart like cobwebs. Thunder returned to the sky, and in that instant the rebellion ended. Zeus stood, his eyes blazing, his voice shaking the clouds. He didn't destroy them, not all of them. He punished them instead. Hera was hung from the heavens in golden shackles, her tears falling as rain. Poseidon was cast to the mortal world to labor as a builder of walls, and Athena, shamed but spared, learned the cost of challenging her own father's crown. When it was done, Zeus looked down from Olympus and saw the same truth that had haunted every god before him. No power lasts without fear. Every throne carries its own rebellion. And though the chains were broken, the silence of that night stayed with him forever. From then on, thunder was not just his weapon, it was his warning, a reminder that even kings of heaven can wake one day to find the sky has turned against them. Before Athens had a name, it was only a hill, bare stone rising above a blue sea. No temples, no marble, no wisdom, just silence and wind. And one day 2 gods stood upon it. Poseidon, lord of the sea, brought the storm with him. His trident gleamed with salt water. His voice rolled like thunder. Across from him stood Athena, the gray-eyed goddess of strategy and thought, calm as the dawn before battle. They both desired the same thing, to become the patron of the new city that would soon rise on that hill. Zeus, unwilling to choose between them, declared, "Let the mortals decide. Each god shall offer a gift, and the people will honor the giver they find most worthy." Poseidon struck first. He raised his trident high and drove it into the rock. The earth split open, and from the stone burst a spring of water, clear, rushing, and fierce. The crowd gasped as it shimmered in the sunlight. Poseidon spread his arms. "This," he said, "is my gift, a sea within your city. You will command the waves, rule the trade routes, conquer the world." The people cheered until they tasted it. The water was salty. It was the sea's reflection, beautiful but undrinkable, a gift of power, not peace. Then Athena stepped forward. She didn't summon thunder or flame. She simply knelt, pressed her hand to the soil, and planted a small branch. From it grew the first olive tree, green and silver in the sunlight. The wind rustled its leaves softly, like whispered promises. "This," she said, "is my gift, food for your hunger, oil for your lamps, wood for your homes. It will not conquer the world, but it will help you endure it. The people looked from the glittering spring to the quiet tree. One shimmered with glory, the other promised life. And in that silence they made their choice. They chose Athens. Poseidon's eyes darkened. He struck the ground again, and the sea surged inland, flooding the shores of Attica in anger. The waves crashed, then receded, leaving the olive tree standing, untouched. Even the storm could not uproot wisdom. From that day, the city was called Athens, and the olive tree became its heart, a symbol of peace, sustenance, and thought. The well of Poseidon and the sacred tree still stood side by side, because even anger and wisdom share the same soil. And so Athens began, not with conquest, but with a choice, between strength and reason, between the trident and the tree. And in choosing the tree, humanity chose the better war, the one fought with the mind. While Zeus threw lightning and Poseidon split the sea, Hades won the war by becoming nothing at all. Before the world had peace, there was war, the Titanomachy, the battle that decided who would rule creation. The Olympian gods, still young and fragile, faced the ancient Titans, vast, immortal beings who had shaped the cosmos itself. The heavens shook, the seas boiled, and even the mountains began to move. But victory wouldn't come from thunder alone. It came from the forge. In the heart of Tartarus, the Cyclopes, those one-eyed smiths of fire and stone, were freed by Zeus after an age of imprisonment. In gratitude, they crafted 3 weapons for the sons of Cronus: thunderbolts for Zeus, a trident for Poseidon, and for Hades something darker. A helm made from shadow and iron, forged in silence, cooled in the void between breaths. It was called the Helm of Darkness. When worn, it didn't just make you invisible, it erased your presence entirely. No god, no titan, no spirit could sense you. You became an absence, a whisper cut from the world. When the war began, Hades didn't fight beside his brothers in the open. He descended into the shadows, placing the helm upon his head, and from that moment he was gone. Not dead, just missing from reality. The Titans never saw him coming. Their weapons vanished in the dark. Their strongholds collapsed from within. Voices whispered and then fell silent. Even the bravest among them struck at empty air, afraid of their own shadows. Hades didn't roar like Zeus or rage like Poseidon. He dismantled his enemies one by one, quietly, patiently, unseen. And that's what broke the Titans, not thunder or earthquakes, but fear of the unseen, the sense that something invisible, inevitable, was hunting them. When the war ended and the Olympians stood victorious, Zeus ruled the sky, Poseidon the sea, but Hades claimed the one realm no one else wanted, the unseen, the underworld. There, in his silent kingdom, he kept the helm, the very symbol of what he had become. It was borrowed only rarely by heroes like Perseus, who used it to strike unseen against Medusa, or by Hermes, who wore it to slip between worlds unnoticed. But it always returned to its true owner, the God who ruled without being seen, whose power came not from thunder, but from inevitability. Even in peace, the helm of darkness remained the quiet reminder that not all power needs to be loud. Some victories are won in whispers. Some rulers reign by absence. And sometimes the most terrifying thing in the world is what you can't see coming. There was once a night when thunder slept, and in that silence the gods decided to betray their king. Zeus had ruled Olympus for an age, his word the law of sky and earth. But the higher he climbed, the heavier his hand became. He punished defiance with storms, mocked the weak, and broke oaths as easily as clouds. Even his own wife, Hera, queen of the gods, watched him stray from justice and call it divine right. And something in her snapped. She was not jealous this time, she was furious, not at his lovers, but at his rule. So she began to plan. In secret, she whispered to Poseidon, who commanded the seas, and Athena, who guided wisdom. Both had grown tired of Zeus's temper and pride. Together they decided, if the king of gods had become a tyrant, then Olympus needed to remember what rebellion felt like. One moonless night, while the halls of heaven lay still, they moved. The torches burned low. The clouds were heavy and waiting. As Zeus slept upon his golden throne, they brought out chains, adamantine, unbreakable even by thunder. Hera touched his hand softly, almost lovingly, before the first link closed around his wrist. Poseidon and Athena fastened the rest. And for the first time since the dawn of the world, the ruler of the gods was bound. The throne shook as he woke. Lightning sparked, but the chains held. Around him stood his wife, his brother, and his daughter, not enemies, but judges. It was not war, it was a trial. They accused him of arrogance, cruelty, and neglect of the very order he swore to protect. For a moment, the sky itself waited for his answer, but thunder was silent that night. Far below, a sea nymph named Thetis saw what had been done and raced to summon help. She called upon Briareus, the 100-handed one whom Zeus had once freed from Tartarus. Briareus stormed the palace, his 100 arms smashing the chains like glass. Thunder returned. The rebellion was over before dawn. When morning came, punishment fell. Hera was hung from the heavens in golden shackles, her cries falling as rain. Poseidon was cast down to build the walls of Troy for mortal kings. Athena, young and wise, was spared, but forbidden to ever speak against her father again. Olympus went on as if nothing had happened, but everyone remembered the night the sky almost fell. Zeus ruled more carefully after that, not gentler, just aware, because once a god has felt the weight of chains, even thunder learns humility. And so the story of Hera's rebellion became a quiet warning carved in the clouds. Even on Olympus, power is never absolute. It only lasts until the next storm gathers. We like to think the gods never changed. 12 thrones on Olympus, 12 eternal names. Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Aphrodite, Hermes, Hephaestus, Demeter, Hestia, fixed in marble, carved in memory. But that's the neat version, the classroom version. In truth, the Greek pantheon was political, and even gods could be replaced. The idea of the 12 Olympians didn't come from the heavens. It came from earth, from city-states, kings, and councils that needed order in both worlds. 12 was a sacred number, cosmic balance. So humans shaped their religion the way they shaped their governments, a divine senate of power reflecting their own. But not every city agreed on who belonged in it. In Athens, Athena reigned supreme. Her wisdom was law. Her people replaced Ares with Hephaestus because Athenians valued craft, invention, and intellect more than bloodshed. Their gods mirrored their ideals. In Sparta, the opposite was true. There, Ares was not just worshipped, he was obeyed. They prayed to war, not to reason. Artemis Orthia, the huntress of discipline and ritual, stood beside him, watching the city's youth train and bleed. In Delphi, the seat of prophecy, Apollo ruled alone for half the year. But in winter he descended to Hades, and Dionysus took his place. For 6 months, order gave way to ecstasy. The priests called it the changing of the god, proof that even Olympus had seasons. And in Crete or Arcadia, the old gods refused to die. The people still whispered prayers to Rhea, mother of gods, or to Pan, the wild spirit of the hills. For them, the Olympians were not replacements, they were neighbors, new rulers sharing an ancient land. Even the goddess Hestia, keeper of the hearth, was sometimes pushed aside for Dionysus, god of wine and frenzy. A quiet flame traded for chaos and dance. A symbolic shift from home to celebration, from safety to passion. When society changed, so did heaven. Every city wrote its own version of Olympus, not as heresy, but as politics. Worship wasn't about truth, it was about belonging. Who you prayed to told the world what kind of city you lived in, what kind of people you wanted to be. And so just as mortals built and toppled kingdoms, they quietly reshaped the divine order above them. The 12 Olympians were never 12 forever. They were 12 for now. Living symbols of shifting power, moving in and out of the sky like stars in a night that never stayed the same. The gods didn't just rule humanity, they reflected it. Its wars, its philosophies, its pride, its politics. Even gods had to eat, or the universe would forget them. In every story of Olympus, there's a feast, golden cups raised, laughter echoing across the marble halls. But those banquets weren't just celebrations, they were maintenance. because the gods didn't live forever by nature. They lived forever by nourishment. Their food was ambrosia, their drink nectar, two divine substances that shimmered like sunlight trapped in liquid. They didn't fill the stomach, they filled existence itself. Each bite renewed their radiance. Each sip kept their essence from dissolving into the void. Without them, the gods would fade like stars at dawn. Ambrosia wasn't fruit, meat, or grain. It was something stranger. Poets called it liquid light, the breath of dawn, the taste of forever. Its scent was said to travel ahead of the gods, filling the air with sweetness before their feet touched the earth. Mortals who smelled it trembled, knowing something eternal had passed by. The drink, nectar, worked the same way. A golden wine poured from sacred vessels, its flavor unknown to humans. Even a drop could heal wounds, erase fatigue, or restore the spirit. Together, ambrosia and nectar weren't indulgence. They were the machinery of immortality. And that's the part the myths rarely say out loud. The gods weren't born immortal. They had to stay immortal. Immortality in the Greek world wasn't perfection, it was maintenance. When Demeter mourned her lost daughter Persephone and refused ambrosia, her body withered, her hair turned dull, and the earth stopped bearing fruit. When Achilles, still an infant, was fed ambrosia by his mother Thetis, his skin hardened like bronze, half mortal, half divine. And when mortals dared to taste it, the results were catastrophic. Tantalus, a mortal king, once stole ambrosia from Olympus to share with his people. For that crime, Zeus cursed him with eternal hunger, water always just out of reach, fruit always just beyond his grasp, because mortals were not meant to feed on forever. For the Greeks, ambrosia symbolized a truth about power. Even divinity depends on something. Even perfection must be replenished. The gods weren't self-contained. They were part of a system, a cosmic metabolism. And just like humans needed bread, the gods needed wonder. Maybe that's why the poets love this image so much, because it blurs the line between mortal and divine. If immortality comes from what you consume, then every act of art, every moment of beauty, every taste of joy is its own kind of ambrosia. Perhaps that's what the Greeks were really saying. Immortality isn't about never dying. It's about never starving for meaning. And even on Olympus, eternity was only as long as the gods kept feeding it. Before Zeus ruled with thunder, he had to ask permission from order itself. Long before Olympus, before kings or crowns or lightning, there was Themis, a titaness born from earth and sky. She didn't wield a weapon, she didn't command storms, but every sunrise, every tide, every heartbeat that followed rhythm, that was her work. Themis was the universe's memory of balance, the law before laws. When Zeus overthrew the Titans and claimed the heavens, his throne stood on victory, not legitimacy. He had won by force, but force alone doesn't make a ruler, it makes a tyrant. And even the gods needed more than fear to stay divine. So Zeus sought out Themis, the embodiment of cosmic order, and made her his consort. Their union wasn't about love, it was about law. By joining with Themis, Zeus didn't just command the world, he aligned with it. Through her, thunder gained purpose, lightning became judgment, power learned restraint. From their union came the Horae, the goddesses of seasons and order, who ensured that time itself followed law. And then came the Fates, who spun, measured, and cut the threads of destiny. Even Zeus, king of the gods, could not command them, because Themis's children answered to no throne. They answered only to balance. Whenever the gods met in council, Themis sat beside Zeus, silent, calm, unblinking. She didn't argue, she didn't shout. Her presence alone was the reminder that even immortals had boundaries. When mortals broke oaths or kings ruled unjustly, Themis withdrew her favor, and chaos crept back in. Famine, war, betrayal. Because when law sleeps, everything else forgets how to stand. Zeus knew this better than anyone. His authority came not from thunder, but from Themis's silent approval. Without her, he was just another storm. With her, he became justice wrapped in lightning. The Greeks understood this deeply. They didn't imagine their gods as perfect. They imagined them bound by order. Even Zeus, the highest of them all, could not break the structure that Themis represented. Because she wasn't just a goddess, she was a principle. The balance between chaos and cosmos. The whisper that said, "Power means nothing if it forgets what it's for." You can still see her today, in every courthouse, in every scale of justice, in every idea that fairness must stand above strength. Themis doesn't rule anymore, but her shadow remains wherever rules outlive rulers. And that's why Zeus's throne never fell, not because he was the strongest, but because he knew when to kneel. Before Themis, before order itself. The first thing Hermes did after being born was steal 50 cows and invent the lie to cover it up. He wasn't even a day old. Born in a quiet cave on Mount Selene to Maia, a shy nymph who wanted nothing to do with Olympus's chaos, Hermes was supposed to be calm, quiet, easy. He wasn't. The moment he opened his eyes, he started scheming. He wriggled out of his cradle, toddled out of the cave, and saw a world too big not to mess with. And that's when he spotted the herds of his half-brother Apollo, god of light and prophecy, grazing peacefully in the valley. To any normal baby, it would have been just cows. But to Hermes, it looked like opportunity. So he did what any reasonable newborn would do. He stole them. He drove 50 of Apollo's finest cattle away into the night. To hide his trail, he reversed their footprints, walking them backward so it looked like they'd wandered in the opposite direction. He even tied branches to his feet to sweep away any trace of his steps. It was a perfect crime, clever, absurd, and completely unnecessary. He sacrificed 2 cows to the gods, then hurried back to his cave, crawled into his cradle, wrapped himself in blankets, and pretended to be asleep. When Apollo discovered the theft and burst in, lightning in his eyes, Hermes blinked innocently and gurgled. Cows? I don't even know what a cow is. Look at me. I can barely talk." Zeus, summoned to judge the case, couldn't help but laugh. The boy's lies were so charming that even justice itself found them entertaining. But Apollo wasn't amused. He demanded repayment, and that's when Hermes did something even bolder. He offered Apollo a gift, a small shell instrument he'd made earlier from a tortoise, strung with sheep gut. When he played it, the air shimmered. Music was born. Apollo, enchanted, accepted the trade, and in that moment, the world gained its first transaction, its first contract, its first commerce. A theft turned into a bargain. A lie became the foundation of civilization. Zeus was impressed. Instead of punishing Hermes, he made him the god of messengers, merchants, travelers, and thieves, all those who live between boundaries, bending truth into opportunity. And that's the paradox of Hermes. He's the liar who invented honesty through trade, the thief who created exchange, the trickster who made meaning out of mischief. He proved that cunning isn't corruption, it's creation. The other gods taught mortals how to fight, rule, and pray, but Hermes taught them how to survive, with words sharp as knives, hands faster than truth, and a grin that always gets away with it. Because sometimes the cleverest act of all is knowing how to make a lie sound like a gift. Before love was soft and golden, it was born red and roaring, from the sea and from a god's last scream. Long before Olympus, when the world was still wild and half-formed, Uranus, the sky, ruled above Gaia, the earth. But he was a cruel husband. He feared his own children, the Titans, and buried them deep inside their mother's body, so they could never rise. Gaia groaned in agony beneath the weight of her imprisoned children, until at last she whispered to her youngest son, Cronus, "Free me." Cronus obeyed. He waited for his father to descend, sickle in hand, and in one violent act he cut the sky from the earth. He severed Uranus's manhood and cast it into the sea. It fell hissing through the waves, and where it struck, the ocean turned white with foam. Aphros, divine matter mingling with mortal water. The sea churned, it frothed, it bled, and then from that foam something began to take shape. A figure rising from the waves, light spilling from her skin, beauty so intense it silenced the wind itself. The foam curled around her like silk, shaping her limbs, her hair, her breath. When her feet touched the shore of Cyprus, flowers bloomed beneath them. The gods watched and named her Aphrodite, the foam-born. She did not cry, she did not speak, she only smiled, and in that smile the world discovered desire. It was not gentle. It was hunger disguised as beauty, the ache that drives creation forward. From violence came love, from mutilation, birth, and so the universe learned its first paradox: even blood can bloom. Later, poets tried to soften her story. They gave her new parents, Zeus and Dione, and called her Aphrodite Pandemos, the goddess of worldly love. But the older truth ran deeper. The first Aphrodite, Aphrodite Urania, was not the goddess of romance. She was the goddess of force, of attraction, of everything drawn irresistibly toward life. She was the sea turning death into beauty, the echo of creation itself. Every wave that hits the shore still repeats her birth. Every kiss that feels like chaos carries her memory. Because Aphrodite is not soft, she is what happens when destruction decides to create again. And maybe that's why the Greeks never feared the violence in love. They knew where it came from the same foam that once carried a goddess to land. From pain, beauty. From ruin, grace. From blood, the sea. Because even the gods were born of scars, and sometimes the most beautiful thing in the world is simply what survived the worst of it. The first sound Hephaestus ever heard was wind, the sound of falling from heaven. He was born not in thunder, but in shame. His mother, Hera, queen of the gods, had created him alone, out of spite, pride, and jealousy. She wanted to prove she didn't need Zeus to give birth to greatness. But when she saw her child, small, twisted, and imperfect, she froze. His legs were weak, his body uneven, and his cry cracked like a spark instead of thunder. And in her disgust, Hera lifted the infant and threw him from Olympus. He fell for 9 days and 9 nights, tumbling through the clouds, through the air, through the silence. No god came after him. When he hit the sea, the waves swallowed him whole, and for a long time Olympus forgot his name. But the sea did not. The nymph Thetis found him, broken but alive, and carried him to a hidden grotto deep beneath the waves. There, surrounded by coral and volcanic fire, Hephaestus learned to use his hands. He could not run, he could not fight, but he could create. He built wonders no god had ever seen, golden thrones that moved on their own, cups that filled themselves, living statues of gleaming metal. He made beauty from pain, motion from stillness. Every spark that flew from his forge was a fragment of his anger, his longing, his will. He was no longer the crippled child who fell from Olympus. He was the unacknowledged architect. Years passed, and one day Hephaestus sent a gift to his mother, a golden throne, flawless and radiant. Hera, delighted by its beauty, sat upon it, and in that instant the trap snapped shut. Invisible bonds coiled around her, holding her fast. No god could free her. Zeus raged, Apollo pleaded, Ares threatened. Hephaestus only laughed. They begged him to return to Olympus, but he refused. It was Dionysus, the god of wine, who finally found him. They drank together, the outcast and the reveler, until the pain softened and the laughter returned. Drunk and grinning, Hephaestus agreed to go back. He freed Hera, and Zeus, seeing his brilliance, welcomed him as the divine smith of Olympus. From then on, his forge burned beneath the mountains, his hammer shaping armor for gods, weapons for heroes, beauty for eternity. His limp never healed, but his spirit never bent. They threw him from the sky for being imperfect, but the world still shines with the things he made. The thrones they sit on, the crowns they wear, the blades they fear, all born from the hands they once cast away. Because Hephaestus never stopped falling. He just learned to fall and build at the same time. Even the god of light had to learn what darkness felt like. Apollo, radiant, golden, perfect, was everything a god was meant to be. He played the lyre like the wind had strings. He healed, he prophesied, he shone. But perfection has a shadow, and Apollo's was hubris, the pride that makes even a god forget he can fall. The first time it happened, he was furious. His son, Asclepius, had learned the secrets of medicine so well that he began to raise the dead. To Zeus, this was a crime against nature, life and death blurred by mortal hands. So he struck Asclepius down with lightning. And Apollo, in his grief and rage, turned on the heavens. He killed the Cyclopes, the divine smiths who forged Zeus's thunderbolts, a god's revenge against the tools of fate. For that act of defiance, Zeus could have destroyed him, but instead he chose something worse. He sent Apollo down. No thunder, no fire, just silence. When the god opened his eyes, he was no longer in Olympus, but on earth, barefoot, powerless, and human. His punishment was not pain, but humility. He was made a shepherd, serving King Admetus of Thessaly, tending flocks beneath the same sun he once commanded. Imagine that. The god of music playing lullabies for sheep. The god of prophecy guessing when it might rain. The god of beauty walking among men who didn't even recognize him. Yet, as the days passed, something changed. Apollo learned the rhythm of the fields, the slow, honest pulse of mortal life. He sang to the herds, and they grew calm. He touched the earth, and flowers followed him. The people whispered that a strange golden shepherd had come to their land, gentle, distant, and sad. 9 years he walked that way. No throne, no temple, no power. And when Zeus finally called him home, the world had changed, and so had he. The arrogance had cooled, the fire had softened. He had learned that even light needs shadow to mean something. But the lesson never fully left him. Apollo's pride would rise again in the contests he held, in the lovers he chased, in the mortals he mocked. And every time, fate reminded him, perfection must pay its price. The Greeks loved him for that, not because he was flawless, but because he failed beautifully. He was proof that even gods could make mistakes, and that punishment didn't always mean cruelty. Sometimes it meant balance. So the next time the sun rises, golden and proud, remember, even that light once walked the earth as a shepherd, learning how to glow without burning. Artemis wasn't a virgin because she feared men. She was a virgin because she didn't need them. In a world where goddesses were defined by who loved them, married them, or betrayed them, Artemis stood alone. No throne beside her, no lover at her side, just the moon above, the forest below, and the echo of her own footsteps through the trees. When she was a child, she went to her father Zeus and made a list of demands. Not wishes, demands. She wanted eternal youth, a bow and arrows like her brother Apollo's, the freedom to live in the wild, and most importantly, the right to remain untouched. No marriage, no ownership, no obligation to any man, god, or mortal. Zeus laughed, but he granted her every request. From that moment, Artemis became something divine that the Greeks weren't used to seeing, a woman who answered to no one. Her virginity wasn't chastity, it was sovereignty. The ancient poets called her pure, but not in the way mortals meant it. Her purity was independence, the refusal to be possessed. She led a band of huntresses who swore the same oath. Together they ran through forests by moonlight, chasing stags, swimming in rivers, laughing without fear. They weren't maidens, they were wild things. They belonged to no temple, no city, no husband. They belonged to the wilderness. But her freedom had a price. Men who tried to take it from her met her wrath. When Actaeon stumbled upon her bathing, she didn't blush or hide. She transformed him into a stag. His own hounds tore him apart. When Orion, her companion, tried to claim her love by force, the earth swallowed him into legend. Artemis's boundaries were sacred. To touch her without consent was to die. Even among the gods she walked differently. Where Aphrodite ruled desire and Hera ruled marriage, Artemis ruled herself. She represented what neither love nor duty could define, the strength of a woman who refused to be controlled. That's why women prayed to her during childbirth, not because she was gentle, but because she understood pain and power existing in the same body. She was a protector, hunter, sister, and moonlight, the embodiment of autonomy. Artemis's virginity wasn't about saying no to men, it was about saying yes to herself. She didn't guard her body out of fear, she guarded her freedom out of pride, and that's what made her untouchable. Because while every other goddess needed a throne or a temple to prove her worth, Artemis needed nothing but the night, a bow in her hand, and the knowledge that her power began and ended with her. Even the god of war hated silence, because in peace no one needed him. Ares, son of Zeus and Hera, was born into a throne he would never truly sit upon. He was the god of blood, fury, and the madness that makes men charge into death smiling. On the battlefield he was a storm, spears bending around him, shields cracking beneath his roar. He was terror and triumph made flesh, and yet, when the fighting stopped, the gods laughed. To mortals, Ares was both savior and curse. They prayed for him to stand beside them, but only for as long as they needed to kill. When the smoke cleared, his temples emptied, because no one wants to remember what war looks like when it's done. Even his own father despised him. Zeus once said, "Of all my children, you are the one I hate the most." It wasn't his strength that angered Zeus, it was his lack of purpose. Ares fought not for justice, not for victory, but for the feeling of it, for the scream, the clash, the rush of blood and noise. He loved war the way a drunk loves wine, knowing it ruins him, but craving it anyway. And so the gods mocked him. When Athena won wars with strategy, she was praised. When Ares won by slaughter, he was shamed. He was the necessary ugliness that no one wanted to thank. But on the battlefield, he was unstoppable. His sons, Deimos, terror, and Phobos, fear, rode beside him, and Eris, goddess of discord, danced in his shadow. They were not symbols of chaos, they were chaos. Yet even Ares, the embodiment of destruction, could be defeated. He was once wounded by a mortal, Diomedes, guided by Athena's hand. The gods watched him scream, bleeding, crawling back to Olympus, and they laughed. The war god, crying like a man. His only comfort was Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Together they were contradicting themselves, passion and pain, beauty and brutality. But even that love became mockery. When Hephaestus trapped them in his golden net and dragged them before the gods, Olympus roared with laughter again. Ares, the war god, humiliated, a god of war bound by love's trick. He was feared in war, forgotten in peace, worshipped in whispers, cursed in victory. The Greeks saw him as a warning, the beauty of battle stripped of its reason. But maybe that's why Ares endured, because every age, every empire, every human heart still calls to him whenever rage feels easier than reason. They mocked him for loving war, but the truth was simpler. War was the only place he was ever loved back. They called him mad, and that's why he was divine. Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy, was not born like other gods. His mother, Semele, was mortal, a woman loved by Zeus. But when Hera discovered the affair, she whispered a cruel idea into Semele's heart. Ask him to show you his true form, if he really is a god. And when Zeus did, his divine fire consumed her. Only the unborn child survived. Zeus, desperate, sewed the infant into his own thigh, carrying him until birth. And so Dionysus became the twice-born god, a creature of contradiction, part mortal, part divine, forever walking between sanity and chaos. But Hera wasn't finished. She cursed him with madness, a storm inside his mind that never stopped moving. He wandered the earth, delirious, laughing and weeping, until something strange happened. He began to teach. He showed mortals how to drink the wine of the gods, not to escape reality, but to dissolve into it. He led women into the forests at night, his followers, the Maenads, who danced in frenzy until their bodies forgot where they ended and the world began. They tore down boundaries, tore down reason, tore down fear. To outsiders, it looked like madness. To Dionysus, it was truth. Because madness was not his curse, it was his revelation. In losing his mind, he had found what the mind hides, the pulse beneath civilization, the primal heartbeat of existence itself. He was not the god of drunkenness, he was the god of release, of letting go of every lie the world tells you about control. But not everyone wanted his kind of freedom. In Thebes, King Pentheus called him a fraud, a lunatic who led women astray. So Dionysus, smiling, lured the king into the forest disguised as one of his own worshippers. There Pentheus watched the Maenads dance until they turned their gaze on him. Blinded by divine frenzy, they tore him apart limb by limb, his own mother leading the slaughter. That was Dionysus's justice, not punishment, but revelation. For the king finally saw what he feared most, himself. And so his cult grew, spreading through Greece like wildfire. Every ritual, every cup of wine, every play, every song, all were echoes of his madness, because Dionysus taught that reason is not the only truth. Sometimes, to see the divine, you have to lose the part of you that insists on being sane. He was chaos, ecstasy, grief, and rebirth, all at once. He was everything civilization hides and everything it secretly longs for. They called him mad, but maybe madness was just the name the sane gave to freedom.
While the gods fought for power, one goddess chose quietly peace, and the world burned a little less because of her. Her name was Hestia, the goddess of the hearth. You won't find her in many myths. No thunderbolts, no wars, no scandal, just a flame, steady, soft, eternal. She was the firstborn of Cronus and Rhea, the first to be swallowed and the last to be freed. And maybe that's why she valued stillness, because she had known chaos longer than anyone else. While her siblings built empires, ruled seas, and hunted gods, Hestia tended the fire that kept them alive. In every home, every city, every temple, her flame burned, never roaring, never fading. It was the one thing that united mortals and immortals alike. Before any offering was made to Zeus or Athena or Ares, the first drop of wine was poured for her, because without her flame, no sacrifice could reach the heavens. She was the bridge between worship and warmth, between prayer and presence. But even in Olympus, peace has a price. When Dionysus, the god of wine, was granted a seat among the 12, a problem arose. There were only 12 thrones. The gods bickered, as they always did, each defending their right to rule. Zeus's voice thundered, Hera's pride flared, Apollo's logic clashed with Ares's temper, and through it all Hestia sat silently by the hearth, watching the flames flicker in her hands. Then, when the shouting grew unbearable, she stood and softly said, "Let him have my place." The hall fell silent. No one had expected surrender. But it wasn't surrender. It was a choice. She gave up her throne not because she was weak, but because she understood something the others never would, that power means nothing without peace to protect it. Hestia remained in the center of Olympus, not on a throne, but by the hearth, where every god gathered to eat and speak. She was there in every conversation, every argument, every reconciliation. She didn't need to rule. She simply kept the fire burning. The Greeks believed her flame was more sacred than any temple. Every home carried her warmth. Every city guarded her light. And though she never left Olympus again, she lived in every household, every human heart that sought comfort after chaos. The poet said she was the most forgotten of the gods, but that's only because she never demanded to be remembered. She didn't need worship. She needed quiet. And in that quiet, she became eternal, because while Zeus ruled the sky and Poseidon ruled the sea, Hestia ruled something far greater, the stillness that keeps the world from tearing itself apart. Every soul that entered the underworld had to cross its rivers, not of water, but of truth, forgetting, and flame. The Greeks believed the land of the dead wasn't empty darkness. It had structure, order, a vast subterranean world divided by rivers that didn't flow to the sea.
They flowed through the soul. Each one tested something different: your honesty, your memory, your capacity to endure what you once were. The first was the river Styx, black and silent, circling Hades 9 times like an eternal chain. Its waters were sacred, lethal, and absolute. Even the gods feared it. When Zeus swore an oath, he did not swear by his throne or his thunderbolt. He swore by the Styx. Because her current carried the oldest law in the cosmos: truth has a price. Any god who lied upon its name would lose their voice, their power, and their immortality for 9 years. The river's goddess, Styx herself, had once sided with Zeus in the Titan War, and for that loyalty, her waters became the foundation of divine justice. It was not beauty that made it sacred, but fear, because even the gods were only as eternal as their word. The second river was Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. It flowed pale and silver, whispering peace to the souls who drank from it. Those who crossed Lethe forgot their past lives, their pain, their joy, even their own names. It was mercy, disguised as emptiness. To forget was to heal, but also to vanish. Philosophers later said that wise souls refused to drink deeply, preferring to remember, even in sorrow. Others sought its peace willingly, choosing oblivion over the weight of memory. Lethe was not cruel, she was quiet, the stillness that follows every storm. Then came Phlegethon, the river of fire. Its flames didn't consume, they cleansed. It flowed through Tartarus, the pit of punishment, burning away guilt that even death couldn't erase. Souls walked beside it in silence, their sins crackling in the light. Its fire was not punishment, but purification, pain as transformation. To pass the Phlegethon was to leave behind what chained you to your crimes. Together, these rivers formed the pulse of the underworld: Styx for truth, Lethe for release, Phlegethon for redemption. They were not separate, they were stages of the same journey. You swore your truth, you forgot your life, you burned away what was left. And then, maybe, you crossed into peace. The Greeks never imagined death as nothingness. They saw it as cleansing, a slow descent through rivers that remembered what you could not. Because to be purified, you had to be stripped of lies, of memory, of guilt, until all that remained was silence and the reflection of yourself in waters that no one could ever cross twice. They say when you die, the first thing you owe isn't your soul, it's a coin. In ancient Greece, death had a price. When someone passed, their family placed a single obol, a small silver coin, on their lips or over their eyes before burial. It wasn't just a custom, it was a passport, a promise, a final message to the world below. I remember who I was. Because beneath the earth, past the roots and silence, waited Charon, the ferryman of the dead. He stood by the black waters of the river Styx, his boat tied to a post of bone. He wasn't cruel, and he wasn't kind. He was simply there, forever waiting, forever rowing. For Charon didn't decide who crossed, he only carried those who paid. The coin wasn't payment for greed, it was a symbol of recognition. To give Charon his obol was to prove you had lived,
that someone remembered you, that you had a place in the story of the living. Without it, the soul wandered the riverbank for 100 years, trapped between worlds, forgotten by both. The Greeks feared nothing more than being unburied, unpaid, unremembered. To die without a coin was to vanish twice, once in body, once in memory. They imagined the moment vividly, the ferryman's hand dry and silent, reaching out from the mist, the cold metal resting in his palm, the creak of the wooden oar as the boat drifted into the current, the water whispering beneath the hull, not waves, but whispers of names. You sat in silence as the living world faded behind you. No wind, no breath, only the faint sound of the river's eternal truth. Nothing is forgotten that is properly paid for. But the obol meant more than just passage. It was a bridge of memory, proof that you were mourned, that someone had honored you enough to prepare your journey. Every coin was a quiet act of love, slipped between lips that would never speak again. It was a way of saying, "Go in peace, I still remember your name." And maybe that's what Sharon truly carried. Not bodies, but memories. Each coin a fragment of the life it came from, each soul a story that still mattered. Because to forget the dead was to let them drift forever, but to give them their obol was to anchor them in eternity. So the next time you hear a coin drop, remember, it's not the sound of metal, it's the sound of remembrance, the oldest promise humanity ever made. To the living, to remember, to the dead, to be remembered, and to Sharon, payment for the silence that follows. In the Greek night, death didn't come with scythes and screams. It came with wings. From the darkness of Nyx, the goddess of night, 2 sons were born, Hypnos and Thanatos, sleep and death. They were twins, inseparable, mirror images of mercy. One closed the eyes for a while, the other closed them forever. But neither was cruel. They didn't hunt or haunt or drag the unwilling. They arrived softly, like twilight folding over day. In the myths, they lived far from Olympus, in a quiet cave where no sunlight ever entered. Poppies and night-blooming flowers grew at the entrance. Inside, the air shimmered with dreams. Hypnos, the gentler of the two, ruled the world of rest. He had wings of mist and eyes like calm water. A single touch from him could even Zeus drift into slumber. When Hera wanted to distract her husband, she turned to Hypnos, and he obeyed, wrapping the god of thunder in velvet darkness. To mortals, he was no thief of time, but a healer, the only god who asked for nothing in return. He gave humans rest, forgetting, and the small death that renews life each dawn. And when Hypnos's work was done, his brother Thanatos followed. He was not horror or punishment. He was stillness, the final exhale, the sigh after pain. Poets called his hands gentle as sleep. In Homer's Iliad, when Sarpedon, a son of Zeus, fell in battle, Thanatos and Hypnos lifted him together, side by side, sleep and death, carrying him home. Even gods trusted them to deliver their dead with tenderness. Thanatos did not choose who died. He simply released. He didn't end life. He ended suffering. To the Greeks, that made him merciful, not malevolent. He was the silence that followed chaos, the peace that came when the storm was over.
Together the brothers taught an ancient truth, that the same darkness that frightens us also saves us. Sleep and death were not enemies of life, they were part of its rhythm. To sleep was to taste death lightly. To die was to sleep without waking. And that's why the Greeks never prayed to escape them. They prayed for them to come gently, because they understood something we often forget, that mercy doesn't always wear a smile. Sometimes it wears wings. Hypnos gives us dreams so we can endure the day. Thanatos takes us home when we can't endure anymore. When you die, the first thing you face isn't fire or mercy, it's a trial. In the Greek underworld, justice didn't end with life, it waited for you. Every soul, king or beggar, warrior or poet, stood in the same quiet hall before three immortal judges, Minos, Rhadamanthys, and Aeacus. Once they were men, now they were the conscience of eternity. They sat upon thrones of black stone, lit by ghostly fire, and the air trembled with the whispers of 1,000 lifetimes. No advocate, no witness, no deception, only truth, naked and undeniable. Even the gods would have bowed there. First came Aeacus, the gatekeeper of Hades. He was the fairest of men in life, a king so just that Zeus himself trusted him with the keys to the underworld. He judged the souls of Europe, soldiers, farmers, merchants, weighing their deeds with the steadiness of a man who had known hunger and war. To him, justice was not perfection, it was balance. If your heart had known loyalty, he saw it. If it had known cruelty, he saw that too. Then came Rhadamanthys, brother of Minos, the strictest of the three. He judged the souls of Asia, where he had once ruled with unbending law. In death, his sense of order became divine. He listened without emotion, his voice like the sound of iron gates closing. But his fairness was flawless. It was said that even the gods would rather stand before him than lie to themselves. He oversaw the Elysian fields, the home of heroes, a paradise of sunlight and music for those who had lived nobly. And last came Minos, son of Zeus, the final arbiter. When Aeacus and Rhadamanthys disagreed, Minos decided. He sat on a golden throne surrounded by the echoes of all human choice. He did not shout or scold, he simply listened. Then, with the calm authority of divine wisdom, he pointed, and the soul's eternity was set. Those found virtuous were sent to the Elysian fields to rest among poets and warriors in eternal spring. Those ordinary, neither wicked nor noble, walked forever in the asphodel meadows, where memory faded and time meant nothing. And the wicked were sent to the fields of punishment, where their cruelty was burned out of them drop by drop, until even their pain became silent. The Greeks imagined this not as cruelty, but as cosmic order. Even death had a system, calm, deliberate, incorruptible. No bribes, no appeals, only the truth you built while you were alive. Because in the end, all souls, gods, mortals, heroes, meet the same question: what did you do with the life you were given? And in the stillness of Hades, three silent judges already know your answer.
The Greeks never believed death divided saints from sinners, only remembered from forgotten. To them, the afterlife wasn't a single heaven or hell. It was a vast kingdom beneath the earth, divided into 3 realms, not of punishment or reward, but of reflection. When a soul arrived, it wasn't asked, "Were you good?" It was asked, "What did you become?" After the trial before the judges of the dead, every spirit walked one of 3 paths. The first led to Elysium, the home of heroes. They called it the Elysian Fields, where golden light never faded and spring never ended. Here lived poets, warriors, and those beloved by the gods. The air shimmered with music, the rivers sang softly, and laughter drifted through the meadows like wind. It wasn't paradise for its luxury. It was peace through honor. The souls here had lived with courage, with purpose, and left behind something worth remembering. To walk in Elysium was to live forever in the memory of the world. The second path led to the asphodel meadows, the gray middle. Most souls ended up here. Ordinary people, neither wicked nor wise, wander through endless fields of pale flowers under a silver sky. It wasn't pain, but it wasn't joy either. It was forgetful. Memories of life faded slowly until the soul no longer remembered what it once loved or feared. They simply existed, quiet, neutral, eternal. To the Greeks, this was not punishment. It was honesty. Most humans live ordinary lives, and the asphodel fields were eternity for the unremarkable, a world without torment, but without color. And then there was Tartarus, the abyss. Deeper than Hades itself, it was older than the gods, a prison built to contain the titans. Later, it became the realm of the wicked, kings, betrayers, and the arrogant who defied the order of heaven. Here burned the fires of consequence, not cruelty. Each punishment reflected the sin. Tantalus, forever reaching for water he could never drink. Sisyphus, pushing a stone that would never rest. Ixion, spinning endlessly on his wheel. Tartarus wasn't hell, it was justice given form, eternal struggle for those who spent life mocking truth. These 3 realms, Elysium, Asphodel, Tartarus, were not meant to separate good from evil, but to balance memory, meaning, and pride. Elysium rewarded those who shaped the world. Asphodel held those who merely passed through it. Tartarus corrected those who broke it. To the Greeks, death wasn't a verdict, it was a mirror, a place where you saw without illusion the weight of your life and what you left behind. And somewhere in that endless twilight, you finally learned what kind of soul you really were. When the first blood of the gods hit the earth answered with vengeance. It began when Cronus rose up against his father, Uranus, and struck him down. As the sky god's blood soaked into Gaia, the earth shuddered, and from that sacred wound were born beings no one could ever escape. The Erinyes, the Furies. Older than Zeus, older than Olympus, they were the first law, the kind written not in tablets, but in blood. The Erinyes weren't demons, they were balance.
They hunted those who broke the oldest laws, crimes against blood, against kin, against the sacred trust between parent and child. They didn't come for thieves or liars, they came for betrayers, for those who had torn the fabric of nature itself. Their appearance was terror, carved into beauty, faces once human but twisted by grief, snakes coiling in their hair, eyes that wept blood but never blinked. They carried torches that never went out, and their wings, black and endless, whispered like storms. To see them wasn't punishment, it was realization. They didn't strike the body, they struck the soul. They drove the guilty mad, not with violence, but with truth. Their whispers crawled through the mind, repeating the crime until confession became the only way to breathe. There were three: Alecto, the unceasing one, whose wrath never cooled; Megara, the jealous one, whose fury fed on betrayal; and Tisiphone, the avenger, whose name meant the murderer's end. Together they were the echo of guilt that no river could wash away. When Orestes killed his mother Clytemnestra to avenge his father, the Furies rose from the shadows and chased him across the world. He begged the gods for mercy, but none would intervene until Athena herself took pity. She gathered a jury of mortals, the first ever, and gave Orestes a trial. When the votes were tied, Athena declared him free, and for the first time in history, vengeance gave way to justice. The Furies were furious, but then they listened. Athena promised them a new role, not as destroyers, but as protectors of truth. They accepted, and were reborn as the Eumenides, the kindly ones. The gods built them a sanctuary in Athens, where they guarded the moral order of the world. Their fire didn't fade, it transformed. The Greeks understood what this meant. Vengeance was not the enemy of justice, it was its beginning. The Furies weren't monsters, they were memory, the voice that whispers in every guilty heart, "You know what you've done." Because in the end, no crime disappears, it only waits, and sooner or later, the earth remembers. Even Zeus, Lord of Thunder, trembled before three quiet sisters with scissors in their hands. They were called the Moirai, the Fates, older than Olympus, older than light. While the gods waged wars in heaven, the Fates sat below, weaving, and everything, every prayer, every lie, every heartbeat, was just another thread in their endless loom. They didn't rule through strength or fear, they ruled through certainty, because even the gods' power ends where inevitability begins. The three sisters were always together, always working. Clotho, the spinner, drew the first thread, the moment of birth. She spun it from the void with hands that never shook. Each thread was unique, some bright and long, others thin and fragile. She never paused to explain why. Then came Lachesis, the allotter. She measured each thread with her golden rod, deciding its length, its joys, its tragedies, its moments of triumph or loss. No one knew what she saw, but she never measured wrong. And then finally, Atropos, the inevitable. She held the shears. She never looked angry, only patient. When she cut, it was silent. No scream, no thunder, just the soft snip that ended everything. Even the gods bowed to them. When Zeus's son Sarpedon was fated to die in battle, Zeus wept. He wanted to save him, to strike down the arrows mid-flight, to defy the pattern. But the fates stood behind him, silent, waiting. And Zeus, king of the sky, lowered his head and let his son fall. Because not even thunder can drown out destiny. The fates didn't punish, they didn't forgive. They were beyond morality. They didn't ask whether you deserved your life. They simply gave it, and when the time came, they took it back. They didn't care for crowns or prayers or temples, only balance. Every life is a thread in a tapestry too vast for mortals or gods to see in full. Sometimes they were imagined as old women weaving by firelight, sometimes as cosmic beings spinning galaxies instead of yarn. But the meaning never changed. Everything that lives moves toward its end, and that ending is not chaos, but design. The Greeks saw this not as cruelty, but comfort, because to be fated was to have meaning, to know that even suffering was part of a pattern too intricate to understand. And so they prayed not to change their fate, but to live it well, to walk their thread with dignity, to shine brightly before the shears closed, because in the end all gods fall silent, all kings become dust, and all stories end the same way, with three sisters, a spinning wheel, and the sound of a single thread being cut. Before she was feared as the goddess of witches, Hecate stood beside Zeus, not beneath him. Long before Olympus rose, before thunder ruled the sky, there was darkness, and from it came Hecate, daughter of Perses and Asteria, born of destruction and starlight. She was a Titaness, ancient and powerful, when gods were still learning their names. And when the Titans fell, Zeus spared only one, not out of mercy, out of respect. He gave her a gift no other god received, dominion over earth, sea, and sky. 3 realms, 3 powers, 3 faces. Even the king of gods shared his authority with her, because while Zeus ruled the heavens, Hecate ruled the spaces between. She was the guardian of boundaries, of doors and decisions, of the edge between night and dawn. Every crossroad was her altar, every flickering torch her light. Travelers left offerings where roads met, whispering her name for guidance. And when the world slept, she walked the borders, where mortals, gods, and ghosts brushed shoulders. But power in shadow is easily misunderstood. Over centuries, the poets changed her story. Her torches became symbols of witchcraft. Her wisdom became fear. And Hecate, once a goddess honored by kings, was remembered only in whispers. Now she was the queen of night, the mistress of ghosts and spells, the silent witness at every haunted place. Where crossroads met, her presence lingered. Where choices carried weight, she watched. The Greeks said her dogs howled before midnight, their cries marking her passage between worlds. They left food for her on moonless nights, bread, honey, garlic, Hecate's supper, not out of dread, but out of reverence, because she was not evil, she was mystery made divine, the light in darkness, the hand that guides when all paths look the same. Her form was triple, maiden, mother, crone, the three faces of womanhood, of time, of the moon itself. She ruled birth, life, and death, and the instant between them that mortals never see. To witches she was patroness, to philosophers she was intuition, to all she was the power of choice, the silent voice that asks, "Which path will you take?" The Greeks said even Zeus bowed his head when she passed, because he ruled the world above, but Hecate, she ruled everything in between. At the edge of the world, where the sun never rises, Odysseus drew his sword and called to the dead. The sea was silent there, the horizon black as obsidian. No birds, no wind, only the whisper of the earth breathing. He had come as Circe commanded, to speak with the prophet Tiresias, long dead, the only one who could tell him how to reach home. But to summon the dead, he would have to feed them. He dug a trench into the cold soil and began the ritual. Milk and honey, wine and water, poured in careful order, barley scattered as an offering to the countless souls below. Then, with steady hands, he took 2 black sheep and cut their throats, their blood pooling dark and thick in the dirt. It seeped downward, and the earth drank. And then they began to rise. From the mist they came like smoke, the shades of the dead, drawn by the scent of blood, their eyes hollow with hunger. They could not speak, could not remember, could not even see him, until they drank from the living blood. Only then could memory return. Only then could a voice from death find its way to sound. Odysseus gripped his sword, trembling. He had faced monsters, storms, and gods, but nothing had ever looked back at him like this. The first soul to appear was Elpenor, one of his own men, dead from a drunken fall, unburied, forgotten. He begged Odysseus to burn his body, to carve his name into a stone so he would not wander nameless in the dark. Odysseus wept, promising to remember. Then came a face he never expected, his mother, Anticlea. He tried to embrace her, but his arms passed through her like smoke. 3 times he reached, 3 times he failed, and the pain of it was sharper than any blade. She told him of his father's grief, of his home fading with time. And she told him even memory dies without the living. Finally, the shade of Tiresias rose, old, blind, and shining faintly with wisdom. He drank from the blood, and his voice echoed like thunder underground. He told Odysseus his fate, that he would return home, but only through suffering, and that if his men harmed the cattle of the sun, they would all be lost. When the ritual ended, the shades retreated into silence, and the blood turned black again. Odysseus sealed the trench and turned away, the first mortal to perform a séance, the first to cross that invisible line between the living and the dead. The Greeks called it nekia, the summoning of shades. But it wasn't witchcraft. It was reverence. A man asking the dead what the living could not answer. Before any priest or prophet ever dared, there was Odysseus, standing at the world's edge, sword in hand, and listening to the voices of the dead.
Once, death disappeared, not by miracle, but by trick. His name was Sisyphus, king of Corinth, clever, charming, and catastrophically full of himself. The kind of man who could outtalk a god and smile while doing it. He was everything the Greeks admired: intelligence, cunning, wit, and everything they feared when those gifts went too far. One day, Thanatos, the god of death, came to collect him. He arrived quiet as shadow, silver chains in hand, ready to lead the king's soul to the underworld. But Sisyphus wasn't afraid. Instead, he poured wine, smiled, and said, "Tell me, mighty Thanatos, how do those chains of yours work?" Death, patient and proud, demonstrated, slipping the metal around his own wrists to show their strength. And that's when Sisyphus snapped them shut. For the first time in history, death was bound, and the world forgot how to die. At first, people celebrated. Wounds healed, soldiers rose from battlefields. The old grew older and older still. But soon it turned grotesque. No one could leave pain behind. Bodies aged but never expired. Animals starved but didn't perish. The world was filled with breathing corpses and unending exhaustion. Even the gods were horrified. Sacrifices stopped. No souls reached Hades. No smoke reached Olympus. It was Ares, god of war, who finally lost his patience. He stormed down to earth, found Thanatos in chains, and freed him with a single blow. And when death returned, he came hungry. He swept across the world, reclaiming all who had been denied him. And he came for Sisyphus first. But the king wasn't finished yet. Before his death, he'd told his wife not to bury him, not to perform the rites. So when he arrived in Hades, he feigned outrage. He said, "My wife has betrayed me. Let me return to punish her." Persephone, soft-hearted, agreed. And once Sisyphus breathed the air of life again, he laughed. He had no intention of coming back. For years he lived happily, knowing he had fooled gods and death itself. But time is patient, and so is Thanatos. Eventually, they came for him again, dragging him back in chains that even his words couldn't unlock. This time, there would be no escape. For defying the laws of life and death, the gods gave him an eternal task: to push a massive boulder up a hill only for it to roll back down each time he neared the top. Forever struggling, forever failing. His punishment wasn't pain, it was pointlessness. For a man who outsmarted death, there could be no worse fate than endless effort without victory. The Greeks said he was cursed, but maybe, as the philosopher Camus once wrote, Sisyphus isn't tragic at all. Maybe he still smiles, because even in endless defeat, he remains what no god could stand, a man who refused to die quietly. Prometheus didn't steal fire to keep humans warm. He stole it to make them dangerous. He was not a god, not quite. A titan born before Olympus, older than thunder, older than Zeus himself. His name meant forethought, and his gift was reason, the power to imagine, to plan, to rebel. When the great war of the Titans ended, Prometheus stood with Zeus, helping him overthrow his father, Cronus. But when victory came, Zeus divided the world in two. The gods bathed in light, and humans left in darkness. No flame, no knowledge, no hope, just obedience. Prometheus saw what Zeus had done, not mercy, but control. Because fire was more than warmth. It was technology, craft, power, civilization itself. And to deny it was to deny humanity its destiny. So Prometheus decided that if the king of the gods ruled through fear, he would answer with rebellion. One night, he climbed Mount Olympus under a sky of storm and silence. He crept past the halls of lightning, past the throne of Zeus himself, and from the chariot fires of the sun he stole a single flame, hid it inside a hollow stalk of fennel, and carried it down the mountain like a secret heart. When he gave it to mankind, the world changed. The first fires burned in the darkness, smoke curled into the sky, and shadows danced for the first time. Humans built, forged, and created. They began to dream of things the gods never meant them to have: tools, art, ambition. And Zeus saw the glow of rebellion spreading across the earth. His punishment was brutal. Prometheus was chained to a mountainside where no one could reach him, his wrists bound with unbreakable iron. Every morning an eagle, the symbol of Zeus, came to feast on his liver. Every night it grew back, and the torment began again. Not for a day, not for a century, forever. But even bound, Prometheus never begged. He laughed, because though his body was captive, his idea was free. He had done the one thing no god had ever dared. He had shared power. To the Greeks, Zeus was not just ruler of heaven, he was order itself. To defy him was to defy the structure of reality. And yet one Titan did, not out of kindness, but conviction. Prometheus became the eternal symbol of resistance, the flame that says, you cannot own knowledge, you cannot silence progress. His fire still burns wherever minds question, build, and refuse to bow. His chains still rattle in every struggle against tyranny. And maybe that's why the gods never killed him outright, because they knew you can punish rebellion, but you can never uninvent fire. Pandora never had a box. She had a jar, a vast clay pithos, big enough to hold the world's chaos. For centuries, we've imagined her lifting the lid of a delicate wooden chest, curiosity glowing in her eyes. But the Greeks told it differently. Her jar was heavy, ancient, and sacred, the kind of vessel used to store grain, oil, or the dead. It wasn't a trinket, it was a boundary. Pandora was not born from sin or desire. She was crafted by the gods, a masterpiece built for vengeance. After Prometheus stole fire from Olympus and gave it to humankind, Zeus sought not to destroy humanity, but to break it from within.
He ordered the gods to make the perfect being, beauty from Aphrodite, charm from Hermes, grace from Athena, and a spark of curiosity that would one day burn the world. Her name meant all gifted. When the jar was given to her, no one told her what it held. Inside was not treasure, but containment. Every shadow, sickness, envy, hunger, grief, and cruelty the gods had kept sealed away, a cosmic quarantine. And one day, when she lifted the lid, the seal broke. Out rushed everything humanity had never known: pain, disease, jealousy, greed. The air filled with cries and whispers that couldn't be silenced. In terror, Pandora slammed the lid shut, but it was too late. Only one thing remained trapped inside the jar: Elpis, the spirit of hope. The poets argued over what that meant. Was hope a mercy, left behind to help mortals endure their new world? Or was it Zeus's cruelest trick, leaving humans with just enough hope to keep suffering? A spark that never dies, yet never saves. The story was never about curiosity as sin. It was about inevitability. The gods built Pandora to do what they themselves feared to do: release the chaos that balances creation. For the Greeks, the jar symbolized containment, not punishment. It was the line between order and entropy, light and shadow. Pandora didn't unleash evil. She revealed what was already part of existence. And yet, the mistranslation changed everything. In the 1500s, a scholar named Erasmus translated the Greek word pithos as pyxis, a box. And just like that, the myth shifted. What was once about balance became about blame. Pandora, once the vessel of divine design, became the symbol of female folly. Curiosity turned into guilt. But the original myth was never so cruel. It said that when everything escapes, when the world breaks open, something always remains: a faint, trembling light still inside the darkness, a whisper that says, "Try again." Because Pandora's jar was never just about chaos escaping. It was about hope surviving, sealed away, waiting for someone brave enough to open it once more. When the gods decided that humanity had failed, it rained for 9 days, and the world drowned in silence. Once the earth was full of people, but they had become cruel, arrogant, and faithless. They mocked the gods, spilled innocent blood, and forgot what it meant to live with reverence. Zeus watched from Olympus and saw nothing worth saving. So he called the clouds, split the skies, and commanded the rain to never end. Rivers swelled, cities disappeared beneath the waves, mountains turned into islands, and within days everything mankind had built was gone, swept into a vast, endless sea. But not everyone perished. One man, Deucalion, son of the Titan Prometheus, had been warned. His father, still chained for his defiance, whispered a final gift of foresight to his son. "Build a chest," he said. "Take your wife Pyrrha. Take only what you need, and when the world drowns, hold fast." So they built their small vessel. No grand ark, no army of animals, just 2 souls drifting through judgment. For 9 days and nights they sailed across a silent ocean, watching the peaks of mountains vanish beneath the waves. The wind was gone, even the gods were quiet. Only the steady beat of rain and the creak of the wooden chest carried them through the end of the world. When the storm finally broke, their vessel came to rest upon Mount Parnassus, a lone peak above the flood. The air was cold. The world below was mud and ruin. There were no voices, no cities, no prayers, just Deucalion and Pyrrha, the last of humankind. They knelt in the mud and wept, not for their survival, but for the silence. And then, through their grief, came a question: how do we begin again? They went to the temple of Themis, goddess of justice, and begged for guidance. The oracle answered in a riddle: "Cover your heads and throw the bones of your mother behind you." At first they were horrified, but then Deucalion understood. Mother meant Gaia, the earth itself, and her bones were the stones that covered the ground. So they obeyed. They wrapped their heads, turned away, and cast stones over their shoulders. And as the stones struck the soil, they softened, shifted, and took shape. Those thrown by Deucalion became men. Those cast by Pyrrha became women. And the earth was repopulated, not by divine breath or holy word, but by stone, will, and hope. To the Greeks, this was not just a story of destruction, it was one of endurance. Zeus did not promise never to flood the world again. He didn't need to, because mankind, reborn from rock, had learned that life can begin even in ruin. And so the rain stopped, the sun returned, and from the bones of the earth, humanity began again. He killed a monster, not by looking at it, but by refusing to. When Perseus, son of Zeus and the mortal Danae, was sent to slay Medusa, it was a death sentence disguised as a quest. No mortal could face her. One glance into her eyes turned flesh to stone. But Perseus wasn't meant to be strong. He was meant to be clever. The gods themselves armed him for it. From Athena, he received a bronze shield polished to mirror brightness. From Hermes, a curved blade sharp enough to cut shadow from light. And from the underworld, Hades' helm of invisibility, so even fear could not see him coming. Each gift was divine technology, ancient tools crafted not for brute power, but for precision. And that mirror would become his greatest weapon. He flew on winged sandals to the edge of the world, to a land no sun touched, where the Gorgons slept among petrified men. Corpses stood frozen in mid-scream. The air was heavy with silence. Even the wind dared not move. Perseus stepped carefully, his shield raised, never once looking ahead, only at the reflection. The bronze shimmered like still water, catching the faint light of the stars. There, distorted but clear enough, was Medusa. Her hair writhed like a nest of serpents, her breath curling into poison mist. She stirred. The serpents hissed, and with one silent step, guided by reflection alone, Perseus swung. The sword sang once, then silence. When he dared to lower the shield, her head lay lifeless at his feet, eyes still open, still deadly. He placed it inside a sacred pouch, never touching it, never looking, because even in death her power remained. From her blood, Pegasus, the winged horse, sprang forth, shining like dawn breaking through darkness. Creation born from destruction, beauty from fear. Perseus did not slay Medusa with divine rage or godlike strength. He won with reason. His mirror wasn't just a tool. It was philosophy made metal. The understanding that sometimes you conquer terror not by confronting it, but by outthinking it. Later, he used Medusa's head not for cruelty, but for justice, freezing tyrants, defending innocence, and returning peace to those who had none. When his work was done, he returned all his gifts to the gods. He kept only his mind, his true weapon. To the Greeks, Perseus marked a new kind of hero, one who fought not against monsters alone, but against ignorance itself. The shield he carried was the first mirror in myth, a reflection that turned death into insight. And ever since, every act of invention, every moment of clarity, echoes that same truth. Sometimes the brightest light comes from the courage to look sideways into the dark. Theseus didn't just slay monsters. He built Athens. Not the marble city we remember, but the idea behind it. The belief that power should be shared, not feared. Before Theseus, Attica was a patchwork of scattered tribes and jealous lords. Each village had its own chief, its own laws, its own gods. They fought as often as they traded, and unity was just a word poets used. But then came a king's son, half mortal, half divine, who saw something greater than himself. After returning from his victory over the Minotaur, Theseus did not rest on glory. He looked at the land around him and saw division, and decided to end it. He traveled from village to village, not as a conqueror, but as a convener. He spoke of one city, under one law, one council, one shared destiny. And slowly the people agreed. It was called the synoikismos, the bringing together. Dozens of rival communities merging into one name, Athens. He abolished the old order of noble privilege, replacing it with councils and assemblies. For the first time, citizens, not kings, debated how to rule. He reduced his own powers, turning the crown from a symbol of control into a symbol of service. And when asked why, he said, "A city belongs not to its ruler, but to those who build it." Theseus created public festivals where every Athenian, rich or poor, could stand together as equals. He organized the Panathenea, where all of Attica would celebrate their unity through games, music, and offerings to Athena, the goddess of wisdom. It wasn't just a festival. It was a statement. We are one people now. In myth, his rule marked the shift from the age of heroes to the age of laws. Before him, power belonged to whoever could lift a sword. After him, it belonged, at least in spirit, to those who could raise a voice. Later reformers like Solon and Cleisthenes, the true architects of democracy, looked back to Theseus as their mythic ancestor, the ruler who had the courage to give away his authority. In their temples, his name was spoken not as a warrior, but as a founder of freedom. Athens would go on to create philosophy, theater, democracy, the cornerstones of Western thought. But all of it began with a myth of a man who united a people not with conquest, but with conversation. And that's what makes Theseus unique among heroes. Hercules conquered monsters, Achilles conquered men, but Theseus, he conquered division. Athens remembered him not as the strongest or the fastest, but as the one who understood that real heroism isn't seizing power, it's learning how to share it.